Destined Desires. A Bad Boy Billionaire Romance Audiobook. Billionaire's Passion Series, Book 2. By Michelle Love and Alize Valentine. Chapter 1. Mara.
It was technically still daylight when I left my youngest sister's house in Illinois. She had said goodbye to me, but Chloe hadn't been able to take her eyes away from Alex Reed, who had been standing there all apologetic, desperate to make amends. They really are cute together, I thought with some amusement. Even if Alex was closer to my age than my sister, I couldn't help regarding them both with a big sister's eye. Really, all that trouble over a little romance. Despite my amusement, I was happy for my fey little Chloe. Alex would steady her, and she would maybe help him take that stick out of his well-bred, rich boy backside. He had been nearly silent all through our drive from White Pines to Elgin, so grim-faced and determined to make things up to Chloe that I thought he might pop a vein. All he had wanted was Chloe's address so that he could drive to see her, but I refused. No way, no how. Nope, not if she doesn't know you're coming and might be unhappy to see you. I'll drive, or you're not getting a thing from me. Alex Reed has at least one brother, so he should know what it's like to be simultaneously frustrated with someone and incredibly protective of them. Now, here I am, leaving my sister to her happy ending, and making the drive north to White Pines again. Shannon, the middle of us Becker sisters, was probably going to be waiting up for me, and I winced a little at the thought. We still needed to talk about what we were going to do with our grandmother's house, and that wasn't a conversation either of us was looking forward to. Chloe had said she would go along with whatever Shannon and I decided, and I barely avoided rolling my eyes. Of course, Chloe weaseled her way out of the difficult decisions and went home with a rich, handsome doctor. Par for the course for Chloe. I had been hoping to get back to White Pine by 8 or 9, but as the sky darkened and large clumpy snowflakes started to fall, I pushed that estimation back and then pushed it back again. My car, a powerful and elderly Mercedes, drove just fine in the cold and snow, but the snow was coming faster and faster. I saw other cars peeling off the exits and the traffic thinning out, but I kept going. It'll be fine. I'll just take it slow. That mantra actually worked at convincing me for almost 4 hours of white-knuckle driving. I drove slowly but steadily, staring so hard into the swirling white blankness ahead of me that I felt as if my eyes were drying out. Time took on a peculiarly elastic quality. I felt as if I had been on the road forever. It felt as if I would never get to White Pines. Then, the miracle of miracles, I saw a sign saying I was just 20 miles away from the city limits. Oh, thank God, I muttered. Afterward, I couldn't figure out if it was the release of that vital bit of tension that caused what happened next, or if it was just some strange twist of fate. I was focused on the road, the conditions actually looking as if they were clearing up, and then there was a deer standing stock still in the middle of the road. As it was happening, it felt as if time stood still. It felt as if I had all the time in the world to look at the deer, to take in its dark eyes, its spindly legs, the round barrel of its body. I saw all of this as I wrenched the wheel to the side with a cry of shock. The deer seemed to wait until the last minute to run out of the way, and when I saw that I had cleared it, I tried to yank the car back onto the road. With a sense of inevitability, I felt the tires spinning underneath me as the car fishtailed, sliding backwards straight into the ditch. I rocked hard against my seatbelt, and for a moment everything went dark. The next thing I knew, there was a frantic tapping on the window, and I could see red lights flashing some small distance away. Oh gosh, is it the cops? I hastened to roll down the window an inch. Now I could see the man in the dark wool coat on the other side, a scarf pulled up to protect his face and a knit cap pulled down over his ears. Are you all right? He asked. I saw your car in the ditch. My first instinct was to say that, of course, I was all right, but instead, I took a moment to assess myself. I was definitely bruised and sore, but there was nothing overtly wrong with me. There was no tenderness at all around my head. I had likely simply blacked out from surprise, not impact. I think I'm all right, I said, and the man nodded. Good. Turn off your car. I'll help you get to mine. I turned off the engine, and I couldn't help feeling as if I had just pulled the plug on my beloved old car's life support. The thought made me feel oddly queasy, but I shoved it away, looking instead at the man on the other side of the door. Are you a cop? I asked. Sorry, no, he said. But come on, I'll take you up the road to White Pines at least. I debated with myself for a minute, and then shrugged. The wind was howling. The car, now that it was off, was cooling off quickly, and I didn't relish waiting for a cop to finally show up. All right, just please don't be a serial killer or anything, all right? He laughed at that, and I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the sound of his laughter. When I opened the door, he steadied me in the frozen weeds by the side of the road. I looked at my car, which looked like a wounded animal in the ditch, and sighed. But there was nothing to be done about that now. I followed him back to his car with its hazards blinking on the side of the road, and before I got in, I whipped out my phone and took a picture of his license plate defiantly. What's that all about? My rescuer asked as he got into the car. To my relief, the heat had been left running, and I focused on forcing some life back to my fingertips. Even that short amount of time outside had left them a little numb. Texting it to my sister to make sure that you actually get me to White Pines, I said, flashing him a wide grin. My cocky attitude dared him to have a problem with my precaution. How a man reacted when a woman did something as simple as ensuring her own safety was always telling. Some men understood and others got angry. This one laughed. Well, you haven't changed a bit, have you, Mara? He asked. Still the same suspicious girl with the bright green eyes. I felt a chill run up my spine, as all sorts of explanations for his words tumbled through my mind. My hand was on the door handle when he put the car in drive and pulled away from the edge of the road. If he had moved one moment slower, I might have jumped into the blizzard and taken my chances. Who the hell are you? I demanded, feeling a little defensive. Of course I was suspicious. When had the world ever given me a reason not to be? You're going to hurt my feelings, darling, he drawled. The car was warming up, and he pulled off the knit cap to reveal a head of thick dark hair. When he glanced at me, a dozen half-intuited hints fell into place before my brain could fully catch up with what I was seeing. His face was leaner than it had been at 18. The strong bones there were starker, but the dark hair was the same, as were the gray eyes visible in the overhead light. My hand flew to my mouth, covering it in surprise. Cade, I murmured. My tongue stuttered over his name, but the rest of me remembered well enough. It felt as if a forest fire raced through my body, making me draw a sharp breath. Good to see you too, darling, Cade said sardonically, a twinkle in his eyes, and we drove toward White Pines.
Chapter 2. Cade.
I had never been one to believe in fate, and I wasn't sure that I did right then. I certainly hadn't been thinking of fate when I saw the car in front of me spin off the road, the winking white tail of a deer disappearing on the other side of the road. Instead, my mind had been filled with images of death and blood, and when the woman in the car had finally stirred, I had felt a relief so profound it made me weak in the knees. After that, all I could think about was getting her to safety and making sure she was well. I actually liked it when she took a picture of my license plate. There was something about the sharp way she answered me, her take-no-prisoners attitude that drew me to her like a magnet. That was when I'd recognized her. I'd recognized the sharpness of her voice, the defiant lift of her chin, and of course by those green eyes that could take a man apart. It was Mara. It was Mara Becker that I had pulled out of the snow, and if that wasn't fate, it was at least proof that the universe had a sense of humor. Gosh, Cade, she said, and something in me thought I could hear some kind of warmth in her tone. If there was warmth there, I told myself not to trust it, but Mara had always been a straight shooter, about most things anyway. What are you doing out here? Oh, the usual, I said. Dashing around in the snow, rescuing pretty girls. Being my regular irresponsible self. Gosh, what the hell was wrong with me? I sounded like a snarky teenager, and she would have had every right to take my head off for it. Instead, she laughed a little, a warm sound that made something inside me come undone. "I'm not going to question it," she said with a light laugh. "I know for a fact that you would have stopped for me 10 years ago. The fact that you were still willing to stop now, I think that's to your credit." Praise from the Queen herself. It took effort to stop myself from warming underneath her words. I had been down that path before, and I knew that it didn't lead anywhere good. "Didn't do it for your approval, Princess," I said with a shrug. "I would have stopped for anyone." "Good," she said, a little tartness entering her tone as well. "Do you want a medal for not checking to see whether a girl is cute or not before you help her out of a wreck?" I wanted to snap my teeth at her, and that was familiar too. Instead, I ignored her, choosing to focus on driving. The blizzard wasn't too bad, and the report said that it would stop by 2 or 3 in the morning. My car could handle it, but I could end up in a ditch as easily as she had. In the old days, Mara would have sailed into a fight with her banner held high, or she would have stalked off with way more dignity and verve than any teenage girl should have. Now, though, she simply looked at me through the darkness. I could feel her gaze on me like a touch, and I drew a deep breath into my lungs, letting it out slowly. When I thought back to Mara and White Pines, a shiver always ran through me. The memories burned bright with warmth and longing, yet as the years passed, they carried a strangeness too, an ache I couldn't quite name. Geez, there had been plenty of women since Mara, the oldest of the Becker girls, but they were mostly gone and forgotten. None of them could draw a shudder from me, the way the mere thought of Mara could. Now that she was in my passenger seat, fully grown, and with those same green eyes, those same full lips, I realized I hadn't been imagining it. I still wanted her, and that thought pissed me off. "What the hell are you looking at?" I asked, and she laughed again. "You, of course," she said, and there was no anger in her voice at all. "Are you still so angry at me?" "I'd have to be pretty insane to still be mad about something that happened 10 years ago," I said gruffly. "Geez, we were kids." "That didn't answer my question," Mara said, but she didn't press. She looked out her window at the sleeting blizzard, and when she spoke again, there was a slightly dreamy quality to her voice. "I was mad at you for a long time, you know," she said. "I might not have had a reason to be, but I was. I thought you had ruined a perfectly good thing, but now maybe I see why you did it. Why you left. Maybe it was even good that you did." That stung more than I thought it would. I could remember my last few nights in White Pines 10 years ago. They weren't pleasant at all. The only person that had made them bearable was sitting beside me right now. Was I right? I asked. I had meant for it to come out snidely, but it was a real question. About what you did, I mean. Did you go to a nice college out east, marry some guy with a portfolio and a perfect credit score at 22, and have an adorable kid by 24? "I think you just described the first 3 or 4 guys I dated," she said with a little laugh. "But no to the rest. That type of guy tends to want a housekeeper and a nanny more than a partner, and when I figured that out, I dropped out and moved to Atlanta." I couldn't stop myself from laughing at that, and she shot me a look that was slightly irritated. "Miss Valedictorian dropped out." "As a matter of fact, I did," she retorted. "It was absolutely the right choice. I wasn't meant to work in business administration. I could see that I was surrounded by the kind of people I already wanted to kill at the age of 19. And if I'd kept on going with that crowd, I might have actually done it at 25. "All right," I said, conciliatory in spite of myself. "I'm sure that speech worked on your parents. What did you do instead?" "What was in Atlanta?" "A guy," she admitted, so shamefaced that I laughed again. Gosh, I wasn't even 20, but I thought he knew everything. It was just dumb. We lasted about 10 minutes after I'd moved down there. "But you didn't move back?" "No. I had too much pride, but once I'd gotten over that, I'd fallen in love with the city, and by then I'd secured a magazine job. I'm an editor now. It's good work. I can do it on the road when I like. And it pays well enough." I risked sneaking a look at her again. She wasn't looking at me, and she wasn't expecting me to be looking at her at all. There was a faint line of tension between her eyes. But it's not what you want to be doing. She flashed me a sharp grin. What about you? Are you living your dream? She asked. Seeing the United States, odd jobs, the great American experience. That was familiar. Gosh, I had been ridiculous at 18, but a part of me still bridled at her tone. You're not the only one who's changed, Mara, I retorted. I bummed around the country for about 2 years. Crossed it half a dozen times, worked on a shrimping boat off the Gulf. Then my uncle called me up and told me he had some work for me. I'm in real estate now. The way I said it, she would have been within her rights to guess that I worked for a landlord somewhere. When she laughed, I bristled, but when I felt her hand move over and touch mine on the wheel, something in me almost purred. I thought about you, she whispered, as if it were a confession. And yes, you were on that damned bike of yours, roaring along the freeway, stopping in towns for a few weeks to get enough gas money to keep going. I can see you on the Gulf, too. I've been there a few times where the water's so blue, it takes your breath away, and the sun rises out of it all red, looking like it's on fire. Were you happy then? No, I said bluntly. It was fun. I had some wild times, but it wasn't right. And what you're doing now? Getting closer to right, maybe. I'm glad. She sounded like she meant it, and I had to actually search for the anger I'd always kept right next to my need for her. Gosh, the fact that she could disarm me in less than half an hour would be hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. I stayed quiet the rest of the way to White Pines, and then I automatically drove her to her grandmother's house. Having a family vacation at your grandma's? I asked as we pulled up. No, she's been dead for a few years, Mara said bluntly. Even as calm and steady as her voice was, there was a hurt there that made me want to take her in my arms. The property got through probate, and now my sisters and I need to figure out what we're doing with it. She wasn't as calm about all of this as she wanted me to think she was, or that she wanted to be herself, but it wasn't my place to press her. Instead, I got out of the car and went around to open her door for her, and she smiled at me, ever the princess. This is where I get off, she said needlessly, but she didn't walk up the stairs toward the door. Maybe we'll see. I could lie and say that I couldn't help myself in that moment, that it was all the memories and need and maybe just a small urge to rewrite the past. Tell the truth and shame the devil, though, it was only because I wanted her. In the dim porch light, with the snow whirling around us and getting caught in her dark hair, I wanted her, and so I pulled her to me and kissed her. She tasted as good as I remembered, all warm and sweet, and after a moment of frozen shock, she pressed herself against me. We were both bundled up against the cold, but I could feel the warmth of her rising to meet me. I couldn't stop myself from burying my hands in her hair, holding her still so I could explore her mouth, learning her all over again, showing her how badly I wanted her. Just as quickly as we had reached for each other, we pulled away again. We stared at each other, and I realized that I couldn't read her at all. We were adults now, not the crazy kids we had been before. There was an entire decade gaping between us, and despite what some part of me tried to insist, we didn't know each other anymore. I started to say something, some apology, something to explain away what we had done, but then the door at the top of the stairs opened, spilling a harsh light over us. Oh my gosh, Mara. Are you all right? I've been calling you. Shannon, my brain helpfully supplied. Standing in pajamas and a robe at the top of the stairs, she stared at us wide-eyed and confused. There were really no explanations for either of us to make, so I turned to Mara. See you later, I murmured. Wait, she blurted out, but I was already getting back in the car, heading back toward my hotel on the other side of town. I tried to tell myself that I was in White Pines to do work, not to mess around with my high school sweetheart. But as I drove through the swirling snow listening to the wind whistle through my windows, I knew that it was only the barest thread of self-control that kept me driving ahead instead of turning around and finding that warmth that I had only ever shared with Mara Becker.
Chapter 3. Mara.
Was that Cade Lowell, yes it was, I said brusquely. Come on, we need to get inside before the cold gets both of us. Shannon followed me inside with a frown, and when I stripped out of my winter gear, I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. As I did so, I could smell something utterly amazing in the air, and I turned to Shannon with surprise. Did you bake a pie? I did, she said with a slight smile. And there's some stew as well. I was hoping to eat with you, but there's plenty left over. You can eat and tell me what the hell happened with Chloe. And with Cade as well, apparently. I wasn't used to having to answer to people anymore, I realized, following her to the kitchen. I worked independently in Atlanta, and I could go days without needing to go into the magazine's office. Even as I noticed it, however, I also noticed how nice it was having my sister sit across from me in our grandmother's old house, ladling out a bowl of stew and cutting off a hunk of thick bread before laying them down in front of me. Gosh, Shannon, did you bake bread too? I was on my own all day, she said with a faint smile. I had to do something, didn't I? Eat and then talk. We hadn't been at our best the past little while, as we tried to figure out everything with the house. The food and her gentle bullying felt like something of a truce, and I was tired enough that I wanted to take it. The food was good enough that I couldn't even savor it, scarfing it down while putting off her expectant gaze. Talking about Chloe and Alex was easy. Shannon nodded and agreed that it seemed like they were good for each other, but I didn't miss the wistful look in her eyes. My sister has always been a bit of a romantic, but romance always seemed to pass her by. I could have told her it wasn't really that great anyway, but that conversation never seemed to go all that well. So much for Chloe and Alex, she mused. Now tell me what's going on with you and Cade. Have you guys, I don't know, gotten together again after all this time? I winced a little at her curiosity because, if I was honest, I didn't know what to make of it myself. Ever since Cade had picked me up, I felt as if everything in my head had been shaken up, thrown around as if in a hurricane. That shouldn't have surprised me, however. That was just Cade. He came in like a storm, and when he left, nothing was the same. He had done it to me once before, after all. 10 years ago. Hey Mara, it's Cade again. Sammy, one of my classmates, drew out Cade's name like taffy, shrill and taunting, but underneath it I could hear her envy clear as day. I shot her a dirty look and walked over to the window, refusing to let myself hurry. I was acting as cool as I could, but the truth was I couldn't stop my heart from skipping a beat. I had transferred to White Pines to finish out my senior year because my grandma needed some help after a fall. I knew why my parents sent me, but I had figured it would be a dull and lonely time, far away from my family and my friends. What I hadn't counted on was Cade Lowell, who had stopped me at Malarkey's, paid for my burger, and then insisted on eating with me. That was almost 6 weeks ago, and we'd been seeing each other every day since. He was on that motorcycle of his that made Grandma fret every time he came to pick me up, and he was completely at ease on it. That was maybe my favorite thing about Cade, how easy he was about everything. He was dressed in black jeans, heavy boots, a black t-shirt, and of course, the omnipresent black motorcycle jacket. It was heavy enough to be armor, and that's how I always thought of it. What do you want? I asked with a mock scowl. Did Carson decide you were too much trouble and fire you or something? Cade grinned, unperturbed, open and easy. Turns out his kid is getting married tomorrow in Madison, so he closed up the garage for the day. I'm heading up to the quarry. Come with me. You think I've got nothing better to do than to come with you? I teased, and his grin turned a little more sly. I might make it worth your while, he offered. I scoffed, but a pleasant warmth was already spreading in my belly, making me want to blush. I pretended to think about it for a minute, and then glanced over my shoulder where a half-dozen other students were fussing over layouts for the school yearbook. I was only there because I had some experience with graphic design, and I was already bored. All right, I'll be right down. I got some glares as I walked out of the room, but it didn't matter. That bright spring afternoon, the only thing I cared about was Cade, and getting as close to him as I could. Cade gave me a helmet and made sure I was clinging tight to him before he roared down the road. Every time I got on his bike with him, I felt a deep thrill of danger and pleasure twined together inside me. When I pressed my cheek to his shoulder, I smelled leather and sweat. I never felt more grown up than I did with Cade. The ride to the quarry was a short one, and soon enough, we had pulled over onto one of the small side roads that wormed their way all over the area. We left his bike in a sheltered spot and walked hand in hand up one of the narrow paths. He let me walk ahead of him, and I could feel his eyes on my rear and my hips. I knew that if I were at home, my parents would never let me go off alone with Cade. He was my age and still attended high school for half the day, working the other half, but there was something more adult about him, more dangerous. Cade and I found a tree with plenty of soft grass underneath, and we curled up on the ground below, my head pillowed on his shoulder. "How are things at home?" I asked, and he shrugged. "Dad somehow missed his usual weekend bender, so he's making up for it now. I might just sleep at the garage if he gets too bad." I winced. Cade's father had a reputation in town, and it wasn't a pleasant one. "You could come over to my place," I suggested. "There's a spare bedroom." Cade laughed, shaking himself a little. "Bet your grandma would love that," he said. "No, the garage is good. It's got a TV, some books. No big deal. But I don't want to talk about that right now." "Oh," I asked, amused. "What do you want to talk about?" As it turned out, he didn't want to talk at all, and as he lay curled up under the tree overlooking the quarry, he started to kiss me. We moved against each other, kissing and learning and exploring, until all I could hear was our breathing, the slide of our clothed bodies rubbing against each other, and our heartbeats thudding as loudly as drums. I wanted him more than I had wanted anything in my life, but when he started to unzip my jeans, I put my hand over his. "No," I said. "I don't want that." Cade blew hair through his lips, pressing his forehead against my shoulder, and reluctantly nodded. He flopped over onto his back, one arm thrown over his eyes, and I appreciated the opportunity to recover myself. "Such a good girl," he teased when we had both caught our breath a little bit. Honestly, I didn't even know why I had stopped him. All I knew was that even if I wanted him something fierce, I didn't want him yet, and I was grateful that he seemed to understand. After a while, we curled up next to each other again, kissing a little and talking more. I listened with half an ear as he talked about getting on his bike to see the country, going from town to town, learning all the ways people were alike and all the ways they were different. I was more worried about my grandma, and how frail she seemed with every passing day. When the sun started to inch toward the horizon, he took me back to town, dropping me off in front of my grandma's house. "I'm going to be working on a project for the next few days, but maybe I could see you on Friday?" "Sounds good," I said. "Sure you won't agree to scandalize the neighborhood and stay in our spare bedroom?" He laughed. "Nah. I'm good. See ya, princess." Friday night came, and I ignored the school chatter about the upcoming spring dance. It all felt very far away to me, all of the talk of who was going, who wasn't. Instead, I went home, checked with my grandma to make sure she had taken all of her medications, and went to read on the porch for a while. Around dusk, just as I was getting ready to give up and go inside, I heard the thunder of Cade's motorcycle. I put my book down and rose up to meet him, a wide smile on my face. When he dismounted and wrapped his arms around me, I felt as light as a feather, like a bit of ash thrown up from a bonfire drifting back down to earth. "Hi," I said softly. "What do you want to do tonight?" He grinned at me. "Want to go to Chicago?" I blinked, laughing in half disbelief. "What, you mean like, for the weekend?" "Cade, you know I can't leave my grandma." "No, not for the weekend, maybe for like a week. There's a guy down there that needs all the hands he can get for some kind of production push, and then after that, I don't know. Maybe down to New Orleans. I've always wanted to see the Gulf. I think my mom's people were from there. Or Los Angeles. Why not?" I stared at him because, despite the sheer insanity that was spilling out of his mouth, there was a part of me that wanted nothing more than to get on his bike with him. I had to push back from him, because I was suddenly so tempted, I couldn't stand it. "What the hell are you talking about, Cade?" I hissed. "Are you leaving? What about school? What about graduation?" Cade's face hardened. "If I want a diploma, I'll get a GED, but I don't want one. I don't want to stay one more minute in this damn town. I've been spending the last few days getting things together, getting some cash, packing up, and now all I need is for you to come with me." The confusion that had been bubbling up inside me swiftly turned to anger, and I glared at him. "You mean that you decided to do this just a few days ago, and now you expect me to drop everything and come with you?" The look he gave me was impatient. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Come on, Mara, you know you're too good for this town. You know that you want to come with me. I know that I'm graduating from this damn high school in a few months, and I know that I need to stay here and look after my grandmother," I snapped. "I thought you knew that, but apparently not." He looked a little guilty at the mention of my grandmother, but he refused to back down. "I want you with me," he said. "We would be awesome together on the road, you know that. I don't want to do this without you." "But you will," I said sadly, reading the decision in his eyes. "Because you've decided, haven't you? I either come with you now with absolutely no preparation, no regard for my responsibilities, and no safety net if everything goes wrong, or it's over." Cade looked stricken, but I refused to quit. "Gosh, Cade. You can't do this to me. You can't just make a decision and insist that I fall in line like some kind of doll." "That's not what I want," he growled. "You know that. I want us to get out of this damn town, and I want us to be ourselves. I want to be with you, and I don't want to be Daniel Lowell's son, who's probably going to end up just like him if I don't get the hell out." "You can't ask me to do this," I repeated, and to my dismay, he took a step back. When I reached for his hand, he shook me off. "Fine," Cade said. "You want a life that you can predict down to the millimeter? You want to go to a nice college, and marry a nice man and live out in the suburbs wondering where the hell your life went, fine." He turned away, striding back toward his bike, and this time I was the one who tried to hang on to his hand. "Cade, don't." He glanced back at me, and his gray eyes were so angry that I fell back a pace. I suddenly remembered all of those people who had said that Cade Lowell had a temper, who had told me he could be violent and cruel, and for the first time I was afraid of him. "You told me what you want, princess," he spat. "And that's fine. If that's the way you want to live your life, fantastic. That's not what I want for myself." I was so stunned by his words that I was completely mute as he got on his motorcycle again. I watched as he gunned the bike down the street, and even though I knew most of the neighborhood was watching me, I stood on the drive and stared after him long after I was gone. "You never told us about any of that," Shannon said quietly, eyes wide. "Well, I stayed at Grandma's for most of that summer, and then I moved home for all of 2 weeks before I started college." I shrugged. It didn't seem like there was much to say. I think maybe Grandma told Mom about it, but it wasn't something that Mom and I ever discussed. "I wish you hadn't been alone with that," Shannon said, and I sighed. "I've never been all that good at spilling my guts," I said. "I just wanted to, I don't know. Not forget it, but put it away, maybe? And now Cade's back and you're back." "He seems so angry still," I mused. "I know he was pretty angry after he left, but shouldn't he have gotten over that? It was so long ago." "Who knows?" Shannon shrugged. "Just because he's back doesn't mean that you have to do anything about it. If he doesn't care for you, you don't have to care for him. You can leave each other be." She rose to take my empty bowl of stew, setting my reward of pie in front of me. We talked about other things, the endless discussion about what to do about the house and how Chloe was doing, and throughout all of it, I couldn't stop my mind from sneaking back to Cade. I don't know if Shannon knew that leaving Cade alone was easier said than done. From the moment we met, we had never been able to leave each other alone if the other was near, not until he rode away from me that spring night almost a decade ago. Now that we were both in White Pines again, who knew what would happen?
Chapter 4. Cade.
I did pretty well, maintaining my self-control. I waited a full 3 days before I drove down to the house where I had dropped Mara off. It was one of those bright days that you get in December. Not a cloud in the achingly blue sky, and the morning frost burned off before noon. White Pines had always been a sleepy little town, but there was interest in it now. More and more folks were flying north for the winter, enchanted with the idea of having a classic holiday worthy of a Hallmark movie, and I was interested in taking advantage of it. The truth was that I had fought going back to my hometown. I knew it was going to be an amazing professional opportunity if I got in on the ground floor, especially for someone who knew the town as well as I did. There were a lot of ways to get rich here, and I certainly didn't mind adding to my considerable fortune. My uncle always said you could never be too rich, and after he taught me everything he knew, I had to agree. I was surprised that White Pines hadn't had much of an effect on me. I was prepared to be deluged by bad memories from long ago the minute I drove past city limits at the beginning of December. My dad had died a handful of years ago, and after I cleared out his apartment, I had never given it a second thought. Now I was back, driving past my old high school, Malarkey's, all the old haunts, and I didn't feel anything. Well, most of the women who'd ever spent more than a few days with me had called me a cold creep, and I was fairly comfortable with them being right about that. Then I turned down the street to Mara's house, and I realized that all my musing had been completely wrong. It felt like all of those emotions I thought I'd left behind as an idiot teenager were just waiting for me there at that house. There was the anger and frustration, of course, but beyond that, there was an anticipation I hadn't felt since I was 18, and head over heels in love with Mara Becker. It was joy and excitement, and the complete certainty that I had found the girl who'd been made for me. In short, it felt like being an 18-year-old again, one who knew absolutely nothing about love and nothing about women. That's what I tried to tell myself anyway. However, when I pulled up into the driveway, I felt the overwhelming familiarity of being in love with the aloof and ferociously intelligent girl from another state. I choked it back, because technically I was there on business, and instead of dwelling on my nostalgic feelings, I walked up the drive to ring the doorbell. Mara answered almost immediately, and for a moment we simply looked at each other. Seeing her out of her bulky winter coat, it was even easier to remember her as she was 10 years ago. She was still tall and generously curvy, her breasts and her hips filling out her casual green dress and her dark leggings with ease. A dark green cardigan covered her shoulders, and incongruously, pink bunny slippers covered her feet. "I think that pink doesn't quite go with the rest of it," I pointed out, and she grinned at me briefly. "Shows what you know. This look is all the rage in Atlanta," she retorted with an affected, pompous tone. "What are you doing here, Cade?" "I come in peace. Can we get out of the cold?" Mara hesitated for a moment, and that hurt more than I thought it would. Then she nodded, and stepped back to let me in the house. "I just finished having lunch, but would you like some coffee?" "I'd love some coffee," I said, following her into the brightly lit kitchen. As we walked, I couldn't help but notice that her grandmother's house had good bones. It was a classic solid wood, with hardwood everywhere. It was slightly shabby in the best way, as if people had lived there and loved it for years. With a faint start, I realized that that was exactly what had happened. It was something that plenty of people would pay to experience, and for a moment I felt oddly ashamed of myself. "You don't need to worry, you know," Mara said, breaking my reverie. "Grandma's been dead for a few years now. She's not going to pop out of the woodwork to grill you on your intentions." She stopped a moment, considering her words. "Though Shannon might. She's away for the moment, though, so you should be safe." "I'm glad to hear it," I said with a laugh. "And no, I wasn't worried about your grandma. I was just noticing what a beautiful home this is." Mara nodded as she set up the coffee before turning to look at me. Her green eyes were as sharp as diamonds, and I felt as if she were taking me apart molecule by molecule. It probably says something about me that it turned me on. So I spent some time on Google, she said, and I blinked. Good for you. I mean, I looked you up. And I found you in some very impressive databases, I have to say. What were you expecting to find? A criminal record? She shrugged, a faint smile on her face. You've done quite well for yourself. Your real estate company is worth billions. I grinned. My uncle got me started. I just went bigger and better. I saw. It's impressive, even if it doesn't really jibe with what I remember. I thought I might have heard a note of censure in her tone. People change, I said, and she nodded. They do. You did. I certainly did. So do you believe that enough to lose the stick you've got stuck in your pride about me? She looked at me expectantly, and I couldn't stop myself from laughing out loud. You really are something, princess, I said. All right, clean slate. A troubled look crossed her face briefly, and I wanted nothing more than to kiss it off of her. Then it passed, and she smiled at me. Something like that. And I want to know why you're here. I didn't think you were really the type to linger. Ouch. Well, all right, cards on the table. Do you realize that you're sitting on a very lucrative investment property? Mara raised her eyebrows. You mean the house? Is this about me telling you that we were having some trouble deciding what to do with it? Yeah. White Pines was a sleepy little place when we were teenagers, Mara, but it's not going to stay sleepy. The holiday getaway industry is booming, and when people think about the perfect holiday, White Pines is exactly what they're looking for. White Pines could be on the verge of an enormous boom in seasonal tourism, and people are looking for houses just like this one. There are plenty of people that would be thrilled to hear news like that, but Mara only gave me a considering look. And what are you proposing that Shannon, Chloe, and I do with this gold mine? Not so much what you would do, but what I would do. I can't make any promises, not without an inspection and some forms filled out, but I've been looking for houses in the area that look just like this one. And once you have them, what are you going to do? Spruce them up a little, and then either sell them as vacation homes or lease them out as the same. A little Christmas cheer for the family for the price of $1,000 or so a day. She blinked at that amount of cash, and I grinned. Oh, believe me, there are plenty of people who will pay for the kind of perfect holiday they never got to experience as kids. And what about you? What about me? I told you, I'm putting in cash too. No, not that, she said, setting 2 steaming cups of coffee in front of us and taking a seat. She slipped her bare feet out of her ridiculous slippers and locked them into the bar under her chair. I meant, would you pay $1,000 a day for that kind of perfect holiday? I hadn't expected to be ambushed by the long-forgotten dreams of my 18-year-old self while I was in White Pines, and I sure as hell hadn't expected to be ambushed by the dreams of an even younger self, one whose dad drank away all the money for Christmas presents, and who saw people going home with fresh Christmas trees and wondered if he could go with them. Well, you know what they say. If you're selling, you probably shouldn't be buying, I hedged, and it felt suddenly as if those green eyes were looking right through me. I see. So you're selling an illusion, something that makes you roll your eyes and laugh. Can't do much without a sense of humor, I said. I think I see our problem, Mara said. You want people to buy an illusion. What my sisters and I are selling here, well, it's something real. Something real? Oh yes, Mara said with a small smile. Something very real. We came up here every Christmas with our parents, and we spent a lot of summers here as well. We grew up here. I spent my last semester in high school here, taking care of my grandma. She got better and enjoyed another 5 years, and it wasn't because of me, but I know I helped. I fell in love with a boy for the first time here, and I got my heart broken here too. So when you come along talking about selling an illusion, well, it doesn't sit quite right, does it? You have a price, I said flatly. It might be higher than I'm willing to pay, but you have one. Of course I do, Mara said. Everyone does. But I just want you to know what you are asking for, and why your pitch doesn't do much for me right now. I had dealt with tough sells before, But Mara wasn't trying to raise the price by playing on my sympathy. She was just telling me what the house actually meant to her, and that plucked a string somewhere in the vicinity of my heart, one that I had thought was permanently stilled. I sipped the coffee, surprisingly good and beautifully hot, and thought for a minute. All right, I'm going to do 3 things. First, I'm going to write a number on this piece of paper. This is the minimum of what we would pay for this house. This is a number that I'm giving you sight unseen. When I see more of it, it could go up. The second thing I'm going to do is ask you to come with me and see what we're doing at some of the other properties I've acquired in town. You told me about this house's past. Now let me show you what its future might look like. Mara was nodding thoughtfully. That was always one of the things that had made her stand out, even 10 years ago. She was someone who wanted to think about what was coming, what it meant. That seems fair. I will tell you, though, that if you're trying to pull a fast one on me, I'll say no out of spite, and my sisters can't budge me when I get like that. I'm not trying to pull something, and if I did, you could be as spiteful as you wanted to be. Does that sound good? So far, so good. You said 3 things. What's the third? Third, I'm sorry to pry, Mara, but when you mentioned the first boy you fell in love with, and the first boy who broke your heart, was that me? I wriggled my eyebrows, thinking that I was being funny, and that she would laugh and maybe smack my arm, shaking her head. Instead, Mara took on that peculiar stillness that she had, that way of looking more like a statue than a person. It was as if she had gone somewhere far away, with no plans of returning until she knew it was safe. Of course it was you, Cade, she said softly. Of course it was.
Chapter 5. Mara.
Geez, why the hell was I doing this? I knew why, of course. The number on the piece of paper that Cade had passed to me was actually double what I'd thought it might be, and the idea of that price increasing made me dizzy. Even Shannon, the one who was most reluctant to sell the house, had nodded and said that I should at least go with Cade and hear him out. I don't think it will do any harm to learn more about what he's offering, Shannon had said. But if you have the least doubts, Mara, don't worry about saying no. We'll figure something else out. The problem was, of course, that I was less worried about what Cade was selling than I was about Cade himself. In the last 3 nights leading up to the day we'd agreed to meet again, I had found myself troubled with dreams. I'm not much of a dreamer, usually. I just close my eyes and wake up again after 7 or 8 hours. The last few nights, though, I had woken up with a head full of Cade. We had never gotten much beyond some fairly fevered groping and some very good kissing, but my dreams were far more explicit. I dreamed about him naked. I dreamed about how he might look at me without any clothes. I dreamed about touching and kissing a lot more than we ever had before. This morning, though, I had woken up from one of the strangest dreams. I had been moving through a fog, and I was calling Cade's name. The only sound that came back to me in that strange and unpleasant place, however, was an echo of my own voice. By the end of the dream, I had simply sat down on the ground to cry. I was restless all day, and when 7 o'clock rolled around, I felt like I was wound tighter than a spring. It might have been easier if Shannon was willing to come with me, but she begged off, deciding to stay home and do some touch-up painting in the living room. At 7 sharp, Cade texted to let me know that he was here, and when I walked out, he opened the car door for me, smiling a little. "The garage still has your car?" he asked. "Yeah. They'll be done by tomorrow at least." "Good." He paused, and when he spoke, there was a touch of reluctance to his tone. "I'm glad to see you, Mara, though I'm sorry your car had to take a header into a ditch to make it happen. You know, it's funny, I thought about contacting you on Facebook a couple times. Do you know it recommends you to me sometimes?" Cade blinked. "Really?" "Yeah. It's freaky. Sometimes I'll be talking with a friend about who knows what, and then there's your face. Why did you never try saying hello?" "I don't know," I confessed. "I guess I thought we were too different, or that too much time had passed. Something. And now I know even less. I still feel this anger surrounding you. There had always been something about Cade that made me feel like I could just tell him whatever was on my mind. It looked like that at least hadn't changed. "I'm not angry at you," he said too quickly, and I shrugged. "Let's see what you want to show me. Your great vision." It was safer to talk about houses and visions. It was too easy to stray from the safe topics and to venture into territory that was too dark by far. And the more conversations I had with him, the easier it became. We talked a bit about human migration patterns and the need for comfort wherever one lived, but then suddenly Cade said something that startled me. "Do you remember the Driscolls' old place?" "I do," I said. "That was abandoned when we were kids, right? And then some kind of cult moved in?" "They weren't really a cult, just a bunch of hippies who wanted to have a good time. The lady who owned the house finally got sober, and after she started a nice quiet life in Anaheim, she wanted to sell out. I picked up this property a while back, and it's a perfect representation of what I'm thinking might be in store for White Pines." The neighborhood around the Driscoll place was older than the area around my grandma's house. There was a lot of lawn around the houses, and they were a bit larger, a bit grander. To my surprise, when we pulled up into the driveway, the house was lit up from the inside and the porch lights were on as well. "Cade, does someone live here right now? Are we interrupting some poor family at dinner?" "Relax. No, no one lives out here. I worked with a designer after we got the house back to code. It was fun, in a weird way. We wanted to be able to show people what they could have in White Pines, what their families could have. Come on." Almost instinctively, he took my hand as we walked up the sidewalk to the front door. It made sense, I thought. The night was getting chillier, and our breath made plumes of steam in the cold air. He unlocked the door, and for a strange moment, I had a vision of him carrying me over the threshold like a new bride. He took my coat, and as he led me into the living room, I looked around in surprise. "Oh, Cade," I murmured. It was like something out of a storybook. When he had described a display house, I had thought of something sleek and obviously designed by professionals. I imagined textiles from across the world and exotic woods. That would have made sense, and that would have been very attractive to a certain kind of wealthy investor or buyer. Instead, this felt like a place a family lived. The furniture was harmonious but mismatched, and there was just a touch of wear on everything, making it look very well loved. The rug on the ground was felted wool of the same kind that my grandmother had, and there was a single pane of stained glass looking into the dining room, perfect and lovely. "Beautiful, isn't it?" asked Cade. "The girl I got to do this is a wonder. She does a lot of antique sales, estate sales, and she can create just about anything." "It's definitely beautiful," I said hesitantly, and Cade cocked his head at me. "But let me see the rest," I said. "Let me see this Cade Lowell holiday vision." He shrugged and led me on a tour of the house. Every room was like the living room, beautifully furnished and looking like a happy family had simply stepped out for a minute, perhaps to see the lights along Main Street. As we walked through the house, though, I could feel something squeezing at my heart. I'm pretty tough about most things, but something about the house with its beautiful homey touches made me want to cry. "So," he asked in the living room again, "what do you think? So this is what you want to sell to people? Fake happiness?" He blinked at me, narrowing his eyes. "This isn't fake, Mara," he said. "The families that will come here to stay are real. This is a setting for them, a place for them to have a good holiday trip. A happy, memorable holiday." I wanted to ask Cade then if he had dreamed of houses like this when he was kid, if he had hoped and prayed that he would have a place that was as calm and as beautiful. It would have been the cruelest thing in the world to ask, because I knew that the answer would be yes. "This feels strange to me," I said, my voice a little gentler. "I can't imagine someone moving right in and deciding that this is okay for a week or 2 weeks or a few months, and then just leaving." "Well, of course you wouldn't be okay with it," he said. "This place was never designed for someone like you." "Someone like me?" I asked. "What do you mean by that?" Cade grinned a little, sideways and crooked, and I felt my heart beat a little faster. "Gosh, that he could do this to me after all this time was downright unfair. You thought you were going to go to college, settle down somewhere and have a family, do all the right things. Instead, you ran all the way to Atlanta to work in magazines. Even your version of rebellion was practical. I know there has to be something else you yearn for, some other reason you felt the need to upend your life and do away with your careful plans. What is it, Mara? Do you want to be in a band? Do you paint? Something about you has always struck me as artistic. A novel, I said, a little nettled. I haven't told my sisters about it. But I had told him. There was something oddly right about it. Write a novel. Whether we had this growing up or not, it's not something we need. I don't know if the people who like it need it or not either. I know that they want it. They'll be pretending too. And what will they be pretending? I asked. There was something oddly magical about this place. The soft way that Cade was talking, the warmth of the house after the harsh cold outside. Whatever kind of magic it was, no matter how artificial or how strange, I took a step closer, wanting to embrace it. Cade looked around, and if there was any part of him that was sad not to have had this kind of life for real, he didn't show it. Oh, any number of things, he said. I mean, if I used this as my getaway, I would be thinking that I'd never left White Pines at all, and that there was some alternate reality where that had turned out all right. Maybe I got a decent job somewhere close by, up at 8, home by 6, steady work, good money. And of course, it would all be worth it, because I'd get to come home to this. I nodded, because I could see where he was going with this. Hell, I had felt the tug of it myself from time to time. And I would have moved up here after college instead of going to Atlanta. Might have gotten a library science degree, and when Mrs. Penske retired. She'll never retire. She'll die behind the desk and then her ghost will run that place, Cade interjected, and I shushed him. Fantasy, remember? When Mrs. Penske retired, I took over for her. I love running the summer reading program, and every day I help people find the books they know they're going to love. Cade took a step closer to me. Is that what would make you happy? He asked huskily. Finding people the books they would love to read? I laughed a little self-consciously. What was it about this man that made me want to bear everything? Sort of. At least I think I would enjoy it. As to what would make me really happy. Maybe publishing my novel. I expected Cade to express polite interest or, if he was feeling a little mean, to laugh. Instead, his face lit up as if Christmas had come early. Really? You have a novel already? Is it something you're letting people read yet? I almost have a novel. I'm maybe 40 or 50 pages from the end. Something like that. You can read it if you want. That would be our first fight, Cade said with a laugh. I want you to take more time off from the library to work on your novel, he said in a serious voice, play acting as if this fantasy were real. And I think that it's way better to go into the Christmas season with money to spend. We have a lot of family, both of us. We really didn't. Cade had been on his own since long before it was appropriate, and I really only had my sisters. The thought sent a pang through me, but it also made me remember that little Chloe was pregnant, and probably getting married soon, if the looks between her and Alex were anything to go by. Cade shook his head, slightly rueful as he looked around. He had been the one to create all of this, but the reality was as distant for him as it was for me. So it seems we even fight in Fantasyland, he mused. There was something melancholy about it, so sad that I came up behind him. He startled a little when I wrapped my arms around his waist, leaning my cheek between his shoulders. He was taller than I was, a full 6 feet to my own 5'8", but he was so much broader and stronger. I fit against him perfectly. That's life here or in Fantasyland. If we never fought, were never angry with one another, or if we never had anything to work out, how would we ever know when things between us were really, really good? You think times would be really, really good, Mara? Sure. Here in Fantasyland, anyway. He turned, and I wondered if I had made a mistake. It had seemed companionable, even sweet when I came up to hug him from behind. When he turned around, however, there was something much more intimate about it. He was so close to me, and I could feel his warmth reaching out to me even through our clothes. It was as if we were burning for each other, and I wondered about fate and inevitability. In Fantasyland, fights end with a kiss, he said, his voice unsteady. I knew that the smart thing to do would have been to back off, to laugh and end the silly game we were playing. We had been too old to play house even back when we met as teens, and we were far too old for it now. As adults, we understood consequences and chemistry, and we should have been more wary of heartbreak and hopeless entanglements. Well, I hate to break the laws of Fantasyland, I murmured, and I tilted my face up for his kiss. It was no chaste peck on the cheek that he gave me. Instead, his powerful arms went around me, drawing me crushingly close, and his lips captured mine with a nearly ravenous hunger. With that kiss, in a single moment, my inhibitions fell away from me, and I knew the only thing that mattered in that moment was what I felt in Cade's arms, what he could make me feel. He kissed me as if the world was coming to an end, and before I even knew I had done it, I had wrapped my arms around him, drawing him as close as I could. He reached up to cradle my cheek with his hand and turned my head slightly, seeking the sensitive skin close to my ear. When he latched his teeth into my earlobe, I gasped, but I couldn't stop myself from pressing close against him, feeling helpless and squirming against him in desperation. This is entirely too much clothing, he gasped, pulling away, and it was the smartest thing I'd ever heard. What followed was an ungraceful shedding of our winter coats and sweaters, left in a heap on the floor like fallen autumn leaves. Our frantic pace slowed once we were down to just ourselves, and then we stopped entirely, taking each other in as if for the very first time. Cade had changed since I last saw him. Stronger, steadier, his presence seemed to fill every inch of the room. I wondered how he would see me, no longer 17, no longer untouched by time. I carried the marks of years lived, of joys and battles both. For a flicker of a moment, I feared what he might think. But the way he looked at me, as if I was the most beautiful thing he had ever laid eyes on, banished every doubt. "Gosh, Princess, you're gorgeous," he whispered, voice thick with awe. Then we were back in each other's arms, holding on as if the world might slip away without this anchor. He pressed me close, and I melted into him, breathing in the familiar scent that was uniquely his. I thought he might not let go, might never let go, but then he pulled back abruptly. "Hey!" I exclaimed, more shaken than I meant to sound. It was his right to stop, but the sudden distance left me aching with disappointment. "If I stay like this, I won't be able to stop myself," he said roughly, eyes dark with longing. "I really don't see the problem with that," I began, only to squeal as he swept me into his arms, bridal style. I had always thought myself too awkward to be carried, but my arms went naturally around his neck. And in that moment, I knew he would never let me fall. Not in a million years. "I have a better idea than that," Cade said, and he carried me to the master bedroom. Like the rest of the house, the master bedroom was decorated with an eye toward care and comfort. When Cade flicked on the small lamp on the dresser, the room was bathed in an amber light that revealed an enormous bed, made up with crisp green striped sheets and a cozy blanket folded neatly at the foot. It looked like the perfect place to sleep away a cold winter night, but the last thing I was thinking about right then was sleep. When Cade set me down on the bed, he didn't join me right away. Instead, he stood back to look at me, and I looked back at him. There was something solemn about that moment. It felt as if we had created more than just a fantasy land, as if we were actually in some other world, some place where he had never left me behind, where I had never refused to come with him. "I think I have compared every woman I've ever been with to you," he said finally, and I shook my head. "Unkind," I murmured, "but maybe I know what you mean." When Cade finally joined me on the bed, he moved more slowly. His kisses, though still searing with passion, had shifted, tender, exploring, as if he was memorizing me one breath at a time. Every brush of his lips, every touch of his hands, carried both reverence and longing, and I felt myself unravel under the weight of it. I threaded my fingers through his dark hair, holding him close, marveling at how deeply he seemed to cherish every part of me. His touch lingered as though he wanted to savor this moment, not rush it, and for the first time in years I let myself be fully seen, fully loved. The world slipped away until there was nothing left but the two of us, our breaths, our laughter, the warmth of skin against skin. Cade's determination to show me how much I meant to him was overwhelming. I clung to him, unable to hold back the soft cries that escaped me, every one of them answered by his whispered words of devotion. When the storm of feeling left me trembling in his arms, he lay beside me, eyes dark with emotion. Before I could catch my breath, he pulled me closer, lifting me with ease. My arms instinctively wrapped around his shoulders, trusting him completely. There was a roughness in the way he held me now, a barely contained need that told me how long he had been waiting for this moment. I braced myself against his chest, marveling at his strength, and together we moved as one. "Oh my gosh," I whispered, breathless, and his gaze locked on mine, fierce and searching. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice husky with restraint. "Yes," I whispered back, emotion thick in my throat. "I just need you, so much." His answering groan came from the very depths of him, and then there was nothing but us, two hearts colliding, two souls clinging, two people rediscovering what they had once lost and now found again. Every touch, every movement was a promise, a vow without words. And when the intensity finally crested between us, leaving us both breathless and shaking, I buried my face against him, knowing with absolute certainty that I had never stopped loving Cade. Not really. Not ever.
Chapter 6. Cade.
If I'm being completely honest, I had imagined this more than once. As it turned out, actually making love with Mara left any shower daydreams or late-night jerk-off sessions in the dirt. The girl of my dreams had turned into a woman made of fire, and the minute we were done, there was already a part of me that was eager to know when we could go again. She whimpered softly, sliding off of me to nestle naturally at my side. I reached over to brush her hair back from her face, and as I did so, I could feel a ripple of anger roll through me at what might have been. Geez, it was 10 years ago, I told myself, but that didn't stop me from rolling away from her and getting to my feet, preparing to leave the bedroom to grab my clothes. "So, is it part of your fantasy to be a salaryman who has to get back to work late at night, or are you just naturally bad at cuddling?" asked Mara. Her voice was confident and amused, and I wondered if she was laughing at me. To be honest, I wondered how long that question had been lingering in my head. "We shouldn't have done this," I said shortly. "This was just supposed to be business." I glanced back to see her eyes narrow. In the dim light of the room, the green turned to black, and there was something sharp and merciless in her gaze. "Really? For someone who wants to keep this all business, you sure did have a good time a few minutes ago." Of course I had a good time. I bit off the rest. "Because it was you. Get out of bed, and let's get dressed, Mara. You've seen what I've got going on here, and you can decide for yourself whether you want in." Mara looked as if she would do as I said for a moment, and then she sat up. "No." I paused halfway to the door and turned back around. "Wait, what?" "No," she repeated accommodatingly, rolling up to her feet. She was gloriously comfortable in her nudity. She set her hands on her generous hips and looked me in the eye. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me why you're still so angry. I mean, sure, sometimes I think I should have gone with you too, but I was still in high school. If you can't see why a high school girl shouldn't blow off graduation, her family, and all her plans just to join a guy who thought that it might be fun to head south for a few months, I don't know what to tell you." I glared at her. I'm pretty damned intimidating when I glare, but Mara just ignored it. Instead, she looked at me, imperious as a queen, and waited to see what I had to say for myself. The anger that had been hiding inside my heart for the better part of a decade bubbled to the surface, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. Why not tell her? Why not try to see what she had to say for herself? "I saw you," I said roughly. "The day after." She scowled at me. "Saw me? What are you talking about?" "The day after you said no," I bit out. "I was going to leave that night, but I couldn't. It wasn't school, it wasn't my dad, it was you. It was just you." I could feel something rough in the back of my throat, but somehow I managed to keep talking. There was nothing in her face to give her away, just a confused frown and sympathy. No guilt. And that surprised me. I rode around all night and that next day, thinking, maybe I should stay. Maybe we could work something out. Next evening, I went back to your house. She blinked. The next, she was lost in thought, trying to remember a different time. That was the spring dance. Yeah, the spring dance, I said. How long did it take you to find a date after I left, Mara? Did you cry over it for an hour or so, and then go back and take your pick of the guys who were drooling over you? Or were you seeing him behind my back the whole time we were together? I don't know what I expected. Maybe she would stutter and deny it, or maybe she would come back and tell me I had no say in anything she did after we broke up that day. Instead, for a moment, her eyes lit up with fury, and she reached for one of the pillows we had pushed off of the bed. I barely knew what she was doing with it before she chucked it at me as hard as she could, right at my head. Damn it, do you ever stop and question something before you write it in stone? She growled. I caught the blanket she threw at me next, and frowned at her. What the hell? Of course, I wasn't seeing anyone else when we were together. And leaving aside the fact that you left me, you have no right to question what I did afterward. Leaving all that aside, you blind idiot, my grandmother got me that date. I blinked. What? She crossed her arms over her breasts, glaring at me and fuming like a volcano. I went to the dance with Andrew Langston, whose girlfriend had just dumped him. His mom and my grandma were friends, and when his girlfriend dumped him right before the dance, Mrs. Langston asked my grandma if I would do him a favor. And you said yes. She glared at me. I might have had some experience with getting dumped abruptly, she retorted. I might have had some reason to be sympathetic toward him. I could feel the world tilt slightly, like the past I had built my life upon was shifting, and everything was sliding back and forth. With Mara's explanation, that anger drifted away, leaving me feeling raw and strangely renewed. You didn't just find a replacement? No, she exclaimed, throwing her hands in the air. You must have seen us during the first hour of the dance. I had to borrow a dress from this older girl that Mrs. Langston knew. She was built like a stick, and I thought that at any moment I was just going to, burst out of it. We went to the dance. We danced one dance together because it seemed like the thing to do, and then for another hour we moped on the sidelines. Then we went to Malarkey's and talked about our respective relationships failing. You didn't do anything else? She gave me a sharp glare. Oh, you mean the part where we checked into a seedy motel and screwed away our sorrows? Dear God, Cade, do you really think you're that easy to get over? Then an expression of shock took over her face. She stared at me, as if she had never seen me before. I felt even more bare than I already was, standing there naked. I felt stripped to my very core, and my first instinct was to take a step back. I didn't want her to see me this hurt over something that had happened 10 damn years ago. I didn't want her to see the things I thought on my darkest nights. Then she was crossing the space between us as if it was nothing. 10 years, thousands of miles, 2 very, very different lives. None of it mattered at all. All that mattered were her arms around me, her warm face pressed against my bare chest. Mara. I meant to push her back. I should have. I didn't want her to pity me, but instead all I could do was hold her close. I swear to you, Cade, when you left, I thought the sun had gone out of the sky. I was furious, both at you and at myself. I blinked, distracted for a moment. Why were you mad at yourself? Because, for a lot of reasons. Because maybe I should have gone with you. Maybe I should have figured things out and found a way for you to stay. Maybe I should have been a better girlfriend, and then you never would have left at all. Hey, you were a great girlfriend. I mean, there was a reason I wanted you to come with me. She grinned up at me, and somehow she wasn't afraid to show me how hurt she had been 10 years ago. That day had left a mark on both of us, and I could sense that she remembered as much as I did. Well, I know that now, she said with her usual practicality. Didn't really get it when I was just a kid. 2 months out, I was moping all over the place and driving my family crazy because I refused to say why. 2 months after I left White Pines, I was in Detroit, I admitted. I came really close to getting into some very nasty trouble. I'm glad you got out. I'm glad for everything that happened that got you back here this month. The way she said it startled me, and then I realized that she was entirely right. With everything that was going on in both our lives, with all of the trouble we had both been through, and all of the history we had with this town, it was nothing short of a miracle that we had made it back at the same time. Even less likely that we had found each other on that lonely stretch of road. This was a second chance that no one deserved, but that against all odds we had been given. As she led me back to bed, a slight smile on her red lips, I realized I had to hang on. I barely believed in second chances. I knew I definitely wasn't going to get a third.
Chapter 7. Mara.
I stared at the page on my laptop accusingly, as if staring at it long enough was going to unlock the secrets that would make me a real writer. My laptop was predictably mute, and no magic words came out to get me to the next bit of action. Instead, my characters were in limbo, and I felt that if I stared at the screen any longer, I would go stark raving mad. It was a few hours past sundown, and there was a velvety quiet over everything. I thought it would be the perfect time to work on my novel for a while, but I hadn't been making all that much progress. "Hey, Mara?" I looked up to see Shannon in the doorway of the little office I had always claimed as my bedroom when we were staying at Grandma's. She looked somehow irritated and amused all at once, which was something. "What's up?" "Cade Lowell is throwing pebbles at my window," she said. "Unless you really pissed him off and he thinks he has a chance with me, he's probably trying to get your attention." I blinked. "Okay, I'll go out and deal with it," I said, blushing just a little at Shannon's laugh as I passed her by. "Well, if you two want to do something that'll put you on Santa's naughty list, I'm going to a choral concert tonight. There's a free one at the community center." "You're getting pretty settled in here," I commented, and she shrugged. "Maybe after we sell the house, I can get an apartment here or something." "You could keep the house," I suggested, and she shook her head. "No, too big, too many rooms. What the heck am I supposed to do with all this? If someone was going to keep it, it should be Chloe. She's the one with a baby coming." I let it go. It was a conversation we had had a few times, and we were still no closer to solving it. None of us really liked the idea of our grandmother's house passing to strangers, but none of us were quite sure what should be done with it either. As I headed to the front door, I was happy to put the matter behind me for at least a little while. Cade was waiting in the yard, and he greeted me with a wide smile. "Hey, you know that was Shannon's window, right?" Cade frowned. "Really? I could have sworn that was yours." "It wasn't even my window when I was 17, I said with a grin. "Did you want something? Or should I get Shannon out here and let her deal with you?" Cade walked up the porch steps and wrapped me in his arms. It felt so good that I stayed in his embrace for a short moment, but then I headed back into house, tugging him after me with a grip on his scarf. It's too cold to be out there without a coat." "So get a coat," Cade said. "I'm taking you out tonight." I blinked at him. This was the first I had heard of it. "Really? Where are we going?" "Well, did you know there's a French restaurant in White Pines now? White tablecloths, red wine, the works. I snagged a reservation for tonight, but there's plenty of time for you to get into something nice." I stared at him. Being taken out to a nice French restaurant seemed like it should be any girl's dream, and I felt a little ungrateful for not being immediately enthused, but I hadn't planned for it at all. "I was working on my novel, actually," I hedged, and Cade shrugged. "You've got plenty of time to do that later, don't you? Come on, you're going to love this place." I frowned at him, pulling away and making no attempt to go up to my room and change out of my sweatshirt and yoga pants. "A please would be nice," I pointed out, and Cade looked startled. "What's the matter?" he asked. I figured you would love some French food after spending a few weeks in White Pines. There was something derogatory about the way he mentioned the town, and it raised my hackles a little. I may not have spent as much time in town as he had, but I had spent enough, and I decided I didn't really like how he was talking about it. As a matter of fact, I'm having a pretty good time eating at all the places I remember, and French food is fine, but I prefer to eat it when I'm in good company. Cade scowled, crossing his arms over his chest. It made him look even more imposing, but I wasn't feeling in a mood to be imposed upon. What the hell is that supposed to mean? He growled, and I glared right back at him. What that means is that I prefer to be asked when it comes to deciding what I'm doing, not told, and that as a matter of fact I do have something better to do than to be dragged to dinner with a man who thinks that he's always in charge. I do not think I'm always in charge. Cade snapped. I was trying to do something nice for you. Cade, you know I don't like surprises, especially when they interfere with plans I've already made. Next time, maybe ask if you want to do something nice for me, I said, and he threw up his hands, walking out the door as quickly as he had come in. I stood still, feeling as if I had just weathered a hurricane. Making a low, frustrated sound in my throat, I threw my hands up in the air and stalked back to my room. Shannon appeared in my doorway a moment later, dressed all in black, with sparkling earrings dangling from her ears. Right, choral concert, I remembered. Was that you and Cade I just heard? She asked, wide-eyed. Is everything okay? Everything is just peachy, I growled. As it turns out, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, particularly when that old dog's favorite trick is to always get his own way. Shannon raised an eyebrow. Should I ask? No, probably not. It's just stupid. I'm sure we'll work it out. She nodded, and 10 minutes later, I heard her car start and head down the driveway, leaving me alone. Of course by then, I had resigned myself to staring at my novel some more, changing a few words here and there and hating all of it. I couldn't stay focused on my writing, because my brain kept returning to Cade and the spat we just had. I'd told Shannon that we would work it out, but what in the hell were we working out? What were we doing? Were we friends with benefits? Were we boyfriend and girlfriend? Something more, something less? More importantly, would he ever learn that the last thing I ever wanted was to be led? I knew plenty of women who loved the idea of being taken care of having a guy take the lead, but most of them also had no problem making their own decisions at the end of the day. In the last 10 years, I had spent plenty of time dating, and plenty of time being single, and what I had learned was that I liked getting my own way too. Sure, if I was in a relationship, I could cede some of the control, compromise, figure out how to find something that would suit all parties, but I had never wanted to give it up entirely. In a dark mood, I wondered what would happen if I told Cade that I wanted to be the one to make all the decisions from here on out. I would be the one to decide where we would eat, what we would do. I knew that he would like it as little as I did, but maybe it would get the point across. I jumped a little when I heard a shower of pebbles against my window. When I opened the curtains, I saw Cade standing in the lawn, a large paper bag in one hand. With a frown, I opened the window. "What are you doing back?" I asked. "Don't you have a reservation at a French restaurant to get to?" Cade grinned, white teeth flashing in the light from the house. "Pull your claws back in, Mara, I come in peace. I thought that maybe, if you didn't want to go out, I could bring some food back to you. Truce?" I thought for a moment, and when my stomach rumbled, I decided that a truce sounded like a great idea. Truce. Come meet me by the back door, it's closest to the kitchen. When I opened the kitchen door for Cade, he startled me by dropping his head down to plant a gentle kiss on my forehead. "Sorry," he said. "You're not an employee, and I shouldn't boss you around like one, nor do I want to." "Really? If you are taking your employees out for French dinners, maybe I have a few more questions for you." He laughed, setting the food on the counter, but his face was serious. "I have a bit of a problem where I like to be in charge, I guess," Cade admitted. "Works just fine when I'm actually paying all of the folks around me. Works less well with you." "Yeah, Unless you start paying my salary, you're going to have to ask permission, or at least for my opinion, I said absently. What did you bring? Believe me when I tell you that the folks at the French restaurant weren't all that keen on packing me up a takeout order, Cade said. I got them to pack up a little bit of everything though. I think that's the duck. It was in fact the duck, dark and fatty and delicious, and I admitted to myself that yes, it was a little nicer than yet another burger at Malarkey's. We took the food, some plates and some silverware into the living room, and with the TV turned on to something light and brainless, we devoured the food. It wasn't the most glamorous date, but there was something companionable about it, sharing food, pointing out what the other should try, talking about the places we had been. Oh my gosh, that was so good, I said with a sigh, leaning back on the couch. Next time you should let me pay, and by next time I mean tomorrow at the latest because that lamb was amazing. First, you're not paying for anything, and second, I'll bring you food whenever you like. I didn't realize you were working on your novel, and I'm sorry I tried to take you away from it. I shot him an amused glance. Let me pay sometimes, I said. You're not actually my employer, remember? He looked like he might argue, but then he shrugged. You know I don't try to dominate things because I think you can't handle them, right? I don't buy dinner because I think that you can't. I tilted my head to look at him. There was something thoughtful on his face, and that was new. The Cade of 10 years ago had been a lot of things, but contemplative definitely hadn't been one of them. Then why do you do things like that? I figured it wasn't for some kind of bullshit macho reason, but I'd be curious to hear what it really is. I want to make sure you know that I can do all those things for you now, he said. That I've got plenty of cash, or that I'm tough enough to handle things, or smart enough. Something like that, anyway. My mind flashed back to Cade and myself 10 years ago, standing just a few dozen yards away from where we were sitting right now. He had looked so arrogant on his bike, demanding that I drop my entire life and come out to the open road with him. Maybe now I could see that it wasn't arrogance at all. Cade, I read up on you. No one is going to question how much cash you have or how tough you are now. I know that, he said with a slightly lopsided smile. There was a time when I was younger, when I wanted to prove it to the world. Now. Yes. Now I just have to prove it to you. The words were calm, stark, and threaded with absolute truth, and I couldn't resist the urge to curl up closer to him, bringing him in for a sweet kiss. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say to him just then. I wanted to tell him that he had nothing to be ashamed of, and that he had nothing to prove to me at all. You don't, I said softly. You really, really don't. Because you know me so well after 10 years away from where we were? I thought about it a moment, and then shook my head. Who you are shines through, I said softly. It gleams. You're something special, Cade, but I've always known it. I know who you are. Sometimes it feels like I've always known. Cade pulled me close to him, a little rough, and I realized that his hands were shaking a little. Cade. It's always been you, he said, his voice slightly hoarse. Is that strange? No matter where I went, who I met, what I did, or how much money I made, in the back of my mind, you were the one that I wanted to understand me. You were the one I was trying to impress. The honesty in his voice, rough as old leather, took my breath away. When he reached up to caress my cheek, I leaned into it. I felt something soft and quaking inside me, as if we had gone too far together to ever be apart. My heart whispered that it was love. My brain tried to pull us both back. You don't need to impress me, Cade, I said, laying a soft kiss on his palm. You just need to touch me. To be with me. His reply was to draw me closer for a kiss, and despite the fine tremors that ran through his frame, I could feel how gentle he was, how he handled me as if I was something infinitely precious and frail. In other circumstances, with other men, that might have been something that frustrated me. I could take a little bit of rough handling, and sometimes I craved it, but right then, in the silence of this house, I wanted to be precious to him. Are you done? He asked softly, and I nodded. In response, he tugged me up from the couch and let me lead him back to the room where I was staying. It was only a twin bed instead of the luxurious king we had shared at the Driscoll's house, but we bundled ourselves into it neatly. We didn't need space between us just then. It felt as if we spent an eternity kissing. There was something about it that reminded me of high school, when we were both full of nothing but wild longing for each other, full of breathless need for things that we couldn't even name yet. We weren't high school kids anymore, we were adults, and we had seen more of the world, been burned, and maybe done a bit of burning ourselves. It felt as if we were making up for a decade of missed kisses. Cade's hands wandered my body, exploring and claiming. I was so eager for him that it felt like forever before he worked his way under my clothes, and when he found my warm skin, I squeaked a little with the cold. "Sorry," he said with a brief chuckle. "Here, give me your hand." When he offered me his hand, I held it gently, pressing a kiss to his knuckles and then to his palm. I let my lips linger there, brushing softly across the sensitive skin, and he drew in a sharp breath of surprise. His reaction made me smile, warmth blooming in my chest at how even the smallest touch seemed to reach him. "Mara." His voice was low, thick with feeling. I looked up at him, a playful smile curving my lips. "Likely the same thing you do to me," I whispered. The intensity in his eyes made my heart pound. It was as if every unspoken word between us had finally risen to the surface. When Cade leaned in and kissed me again, it felt like the closing of a circle, as though he had always been a part of me, always been locked inside my heart, waiting for this moment to break free. And now that he was here with me, I knew I never wanted to let him go. Silently, we shed the barriers between us, returning to each other with a passion that only grew stronger the closer we became. His hands framed my face, his mouth claimed mine, and in every kiss I felt a vow, a promise. As the world blurred away and it was only us, I closed my eyes and sent up a prayer, soft and fervent. "Please, please let me keep him. I love him. I've always loved him."
Chapter 8. Cade.
I had always thought that this time of the year went fast in the business world, but the speed at which Christmas came hurtling toward me and Mara was completely overwhelming. It seemed like days flew by in the span of a few hours, and I wondered if this was what happiness was like. I guess I'd always assumed that I was happy. I was happy on my own, and I was happy working for my uncle and then building my fortune. Good looks and cash, once you've got that, you've got it made, as far as most people are concerned. I didn't realize how devastatingly lonely I had been until I looked over at Mara the night of the disastrous French dinner. We were crammed into that tiny bed after wearing each other out, cuddled as close as we could get. Her cheek was pressed against my chest, and she had one arm thrown over my waist as if she owned me. She murmured a little in her sleep, a frown marring her forehead, but she quieted and calmed when I reached up to stroke her hair. She made a contented noise and snuggled closer to me. In that moment, I realized a few things. The first was that I had never been entirely happy before that moment. Not in all my life. She felt like Christmas morning every day, like some precious treasure I had to keep safe. The second thing I realized was that I loved her. It was like lightning striking. The world felt different after I realized it, and after that there was no way that I was sleeping. I loved her, and nothing would ever be the same. This was the real thing. This wasn't something I was selling to people who were too busy to do much beyond work, and this was the thing that people might search for their entire lives and never get. At some point I dozed off, but I awoke again close to dawn. There was a chill to the air, and in the night we had both burrowed under the covers. With a silent sigh, I disentangled myself from Mara and the blanket, tucking her back in as soundly as I could before reaching for my clothes. Why don't you come back to bed?" Mara asked blearily. "It's too early for much of anything." I chuckled a little, evading the grasping hand that snaked out of the covers to drag me back. "Unfortunately, I really can't stay in bed with you all day, much as I would like to," I said. "Work needs to be done, and if I stay with you, I'll just be deliciously distracted." "So be distracted." I figured one of the benefits of having all that money was getting to work when you wanted to. and being free to do as you please the rest of the time. You'd think that, wouldn't you? Later, though. Later we'll have all the time in the world. I nearly caved and told her what I was thinking of right then and there, but somehow I stopped myself. She didn't do much more than tug at my shirt sleeve petulantly when I leaned in for a kiss, and before I had closed the door behind me, I could hear her breathing level out. I sneaked through the house toward the front door, but I needn't have bothered. Shannon Becker sat curled in the living room with a cup of coffee in her hands, and she raised her eyebrows at me when I paused in the hallway. "There's some coffee if you want some," she offered. "Sorry, I don't know what the etiquette is for running into your sister's date first thing in the morning." "Well, assuming you don't run me off with a shotgun, I'll say that we're all doing well," I said. "And yeah, coffee is good too." The coffee was surprisingly good, and Shannon wandered into the kitchen to watch me as I poured myself a mug. "I tend to think that Mara can handle her men," she said, "but then there's you." I turned to her with a curious expression on my face. Shannon and Mara didn't look much alike. Where Mara was all hourglass curves, dark hair, and tumultuous green eyes, Shannon was plainer, quieter. "If you think Mara can't handle me, I'm pretty sure you're wrong." Shannon's smile was thin. "I think she thinks it," she said. "You did a number on her 10 years ago." There was something razor-sharp about Shannon's words, and I frowned at her, sipping the coffee and trying to keep it from burning my throat. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, because in her plaid bathrobe with her hair in a messy bun, Shannon didn't look very threatening. "I would if I thought I could bring anything scarier than Mara could," Shannon admitted. "Really, shotgun speeches are more her area than mine." "Ah. So what's your area?" "Just telling the truth, I suppose. Mara acts really tough, but the truth is that you hurt her. She never told anyone about you and what happened, did you know that? She kept it from all of us, and she used to tell us everything. I think you hurt her too much for that." I stared at Shannon, wondering if she was laying it on thick, but she looked utterly serious. "I didn't know that," I said, and she looked carefully into my face. Mara was all motion, but Shannon had a gift for stillness. Finally, she nodded. "All right. I think you'll do the right thing and treat my sister right. At least, I hope you will." Shannon's words stuck with me the rest of that day. The thought that I'd be able to hurt Mara, not just anger her, not just irritate her or frustrate her, was still slightly incredible to me. Because that meant she cared about me a whole lot. It made me feel like even more of a jerk for making that long-ago mistake about her spring dance. Mara and I talked on the phone and texted constantly in the days leading up to Christmas Eve, but I wasn't able to see her again. I told her I was busy, and that was the understatement of the decade. I had never really thought about how much effort it took to put an empire on hold, but it required all of my attention. The key to making the money I had in my career was constant diversification and putting the right people into key positions of power. When I called, they answered, and in a series of meetings involving various concerned and surprised people, I let them know that I would be taking a step back from everything. They would be in charge of the day-to-day affairs, and unless an actual emergency arose, this was going to continue indefinitely. When one man, who I had put in charge of all Florida operations, asked me privately if everything was okay, his worry actually looked foreign to me. In my mind, I was already living in another place, another world with Mara. It would be perfect, and there was a chance I might never go back to what I had been doing before. If that was the case, some of these arrangements might become permanent. I shook my head and told him there was nothing to worry about. I had simply changed, and it was time to do something else. After the meetings were finally over, I finally had time to do what I had held in the back of my mind the entire time. Some of the arrangements were very quick, but others took a little longer. It took all of the resources I had at my disposal to get everything ready for Christmas Eve, but I did it. I showed up at Mara's place just after dark. This time, she knew I was coming and that I was taking her out. She met me at the door, in a shimmering lilac gray dress that made her eyes even greener, and the smile she gave me made my heart beat faster. "Are we all good?" I asked teasingly. "You can tear yourself away from your novel for a little while." "All good," she said with a grin. "Gosh, but it's good to see you. I've been missing you for days." She hugged me tight, and the kisses we exchanged were on the verge of going from sweet to passionate in a moment. As much as I wanted to take her back upstairs, I had plans for the evening, so I pulled away. "I've missed you more than I can say," I said warmly. "I'll try to say it, though, if you like. Go on and get your coat. I made reservations for us at the French restaurant." We talked of small things on the drive over, and it occurred to me that she had no idea what was coming. There was no artifice to her at all, nothing that expected a single thing from me besides me being myself. This was right. This was perfect. We ate the delicious French food, and when I asked her if she was ready for dessert, she grinned at me. "You know I always am," she said with a smile. I gestured at the waiter, who nodded, and brought out what looked like a globe of dark chocolate decorated with swirls of white. She looked at it quizzically, not quite sure what to do with it, and I nodded at her. "You break it," I supplied. "There's a surprise inside." "So it's like an enormous Kinder egg," she said with a grin. She cracked the top off the chocolate globe with a spoon, and with a surprised look she drew out 2 tickets. "Cade, what's this?" "First-class tickets to Beijing," I said with a grin. "I have a house there, and we can leave whenever you like. Hell, we could be in Beijing by the day after tomorrow, if you wanted." She stared at me. "And what are we going to do in Beijing?" "Whatever you like," I said expansively. "Work on your novel, see the sights, drive out into the country to see what that's like. Mara, these last few weeks have been amazing. I want to be with you, and I want—" "You want," Mara said heatedly, and to my shock, she stood up, laying her napkin to one side. "I'm seeing a distinct theme here, Cade." She stalked out of the restaurant, leaving me so shocked that for a moment I just let her go. Then I hurried after her, throwing a few hundred down on the table to pay for the meal. I caught up with her in the frigidly cold parking lot, and before she could go another step farther, I grabbed her arm. "What the hell, Mara? You can't just storm out on me like that without some kind of explanation." She whirled on me, jerking her arm out of my grasp. Her eyes were brilliant in the lights of the parking lot, a green so hot they almost burned. "Explanation? All right, I'll give you an explanation, Cade, but I don't know how much good it'll do because you don't seem to hear it ever." "What are you?" "This is just like when we were 17, Mara cried. "You think you can go ahead and make all kinds of decisions and that I'll be happy to go along with them. You think that I'll drop everything in my life just to follow you around on whatever adventure you've got cooking." "This wouldn't be just my adventure," I protested. "This would be ours." "No, it's yours," she spat. "You decided on Beijing, you bought tickets." "Geez, I can buy tickets somewhere else." "Don't bother, I'm not going. If this is how you want to live your life, that's fine, but you'll have to find someone else to do that with, because it's not for me." Something dark in me reared its ugly head, and I glowered at her. I wasn't sure how this had all gone so wrong, but it had, and that stung worse than I thought it would. "Does it feel good to be the one saying no to everything, Mara? Is this the closest thing to power you ever get to feel?" She gaped at me, but I tore ahead, heedless of the shocked look on her face. "Do you get off on turning away from things? Is it because I'm not good enough for you? Is it because you're afraid of taking risks? You've always got responsibilities and plans to follow, but I can't help but notice you're the only one making them. What are you? You're always so rigid. You're always doing what other people think the right thing should be. Sometimes, that right thing seems to keep you from doing anything daring, taking any risks at all. Sometimes that right thing isn't right for you at all." Mara clamped her jaw shut with a snap, and to my shock I could see there were tears in her eyes. "Leave me alone," she said. "If you don't let me walk off right now, I will call the police and have you arrested." Her threat shocked me less than her tears had, but I still froze where I stood. I watched as she stalked to the end of the block, and after a few strokes on her phone, a cab came and picked her up, leaving me alone.
Chapter 9. Mara.
Christmas Day dawned bright and crystal clear. There was a thin blanket of white snow on the ground, giving White Pines a sparkling glamour that should have brightened anyone's day, but I was far from a space where I could be cheered up. I had stumbled into the house the night before, walking straight past a stunned Shannon to shut myself up in my room. I'd cried so hard that my head still felt a little sore. Eventually, sometime in the middle of the night, Shannon, armed with soup and some actual fresh-baked cookies, got the whole story out of me. She looked sad but not surprised, and somehow that made it worse. "I thought he had finally figured it out," I said, drinking some water to try to rehydrate at least a little. I don't know." "You thought he saw you and not just what he wanted to see," Shannon said, squeezing my hand gently, and I smiled at her a little. "Gosh, you're smart," I said. "You should have been the writer." "I'll leave that to you," she said, wrinkling her nose in a surprisingly adorable way. "I'm just happy enough to bake cookies and be moral support." Shannon had always been so sensitive to what Chloe and I were feeling. She left me alone the rest of the evening, and the next morning, she made sure that I had a breakfast of toast, bacon and eggs waiting for me as soon as I got up. "This is good, thank you," I said blearily. "I have some presents for you too, but you can open them tonight," she said with a smile, and I smiled back a little. I was going to say that she was getting some gift certificates, but then there was a knock on the door. I stiffened, and Shannon went to look. "It's him," she called back to me. "Should I just tell him off?" That made me laugh. That was usually my job, and I shook my head. "You're a good sister," I said. "I can handle it." "All right," she said, heading upstairs. "But if you need anything, just yell." There might be some yelling, regardless of whether I needed anything, I thought. Wishing that I was wearing something more dignified than ratty pajamas and a robe, I opened the door. Cade was dressed in the same blue suit he had worn the night before, and there was something hollow in his eyes. He stepped in the house without waiting for an invitation, and looked at me for a long moment. "What do you want?" I asked, unable to resist adding, "Would have thought you'd be in Beijing by now." "I was wrong," he said bluntly. "Completely wrong. I shouldn't have tried to kidnap you away again, and I shouldn't have just assumed you were coming with me." "Why did you think I would?" I asked, feeling my heart tie itself into a knot. I cared about him more than I had ever cared about anyone, but this wasn't a fight I could have over and over and over again. "Because I would have gone for you," he said, the words pouring out of him. "Because I love you," and I thought, I wasn't thinking at all. "I want you, and I love you, and I need you with me, Mara." I stared at him, frozen with shock, my hands flying to my mouth. "I love you too," I choked out. But when was love ever enough? "But Cade, I understand that you like adventure, and I don't want to stop you from living your dreams. I don't want you to not go to Beijing if that's what you want. But there's so much I need to do, so much, and if you can't, pick a place." "What?" "Pick a place, anywhere in the world. I don't care if it's Bangkok or Paris or Ulaanbaatar. I don't care if you want to stay for a week, a month, a year, or even an hour. I don't care about going to Beijing. I don't care about going to any one place. It was never about going to Beijing. It was about going somewhere together, so we could have an adventure together. So we could start a life together. I understand why you think this is just like 10 years ago, but I promise you I get it now. So name any place. I will take us there, and I will stay with you. Just please, Mara. Believe me." I stared at him, and it all clicked into place. I could see now that my past hurt may have spurred my anger the night before. It had just felt so familiar. But things were different now. Cade was different now. I knew this wouldn't be our last fight, and that we might each still have a bit of pain from our past to work through, but I couldn't resist him any longer. I threw myself into his arms, and all I could say was that I loved him over and over again. We could get through anything, together. "Where to, princess?" he said, and his voice sounded as coarse as sandpaper. Anywhere in the world, you name it. It's up to you, forever. We can figure out a place together. That's all I care about, that it's you and me together. Anywhere in the world, as long as I'll be with you, I whispered, and I knew that that was the most important thing.
2 years later. Cade.
Are you going to stop looking at your reviews? We're landing in just about 20 minutes. Mara glanced up from her phone long enough to lean over and give me a kiss. 2 more good ones and one that's a bit meh, but the meh review belongs to some guy who actually thinks the earth is flat. But all right, just for you, I'll put it away. My wife, the famous novelist, I said with a grin. Are you giving everyone a copy of your novel for Christmas this year? It'd be easy enough, but no, she said, snuggling next to me. It's just gift certificates again. Call me boring, but nothing says love like convenience and cash. The private jet that was taking us from New York to Wisconsin was comfortable, but the truth was that I couldn't wait to be on the ground. After Paris, Milan, and Moscow, it felt strange to be excited by a little town like White Pines, but there it was. It's been an amazing time, I said softly, stroking Mara's hair. What? Listening to me complain about reviews the whole way from New York. I thought about the last 2 years, the give and take that had grown between the two of us, as we realized that instead of either of us being in charge, we could simply rely on each other. She had taught me more about love than anyone else in the world, and this was the reward. Mara curled up next to me, gazing at me with wry adoration and her signature brassiness. All of it, I said with a grin, and I pulled her in for a long kiss that only ended when the flight attendant told us it was time to fasten our seat belts.
The end. Sneak peek for Billionaire's Secret Baby. We hope you enjoyed listening to Destined Desires by Michelle Love and Alize Valentine. Now please listen to a sneak peek for Billionaire's Secret Baby by Michelle Love and Ivy Wonder. Chapter 1. Cohen.
Good financial news never failed to stir something deep in my soul. Money always moved me in ways nothing else could. Whistling a happy tune as I sauntered down the hallway after leaving my office, I winked at one of the maids as she pushed her cart, coming my way. "Mornin', Miss Sarah. Hope you're having a lovely day." "The same to you, Mr. Nash." Her smile, sweet and genuine, told me that she liked her job at Whispers Resort and Spa. Pride filled me. I did not doubt that our employees felt comfortable, safe, and happy with their jobs at the resort my brothers and I had built from the ground up. So, I thought I might let her in on something. I'm on my way to meet with my brothers. If things go right, everyone will be getting a raise. Her dark eyes brightened as a smile curved her plump lips. "Really, sir?" "Really. We'd made a fantastic profit in the last quarter, and we always shared the wealth with those who'd helped us make it. Your next paycheck should be a bit higher." "Thank you so much, Mr. Nash." She hugged herself as if she'd gotten chill bumps. "I can't tell you how much I love working here. You're the best bosses anyone could ever ask for." "Aw, thanks." Flattery far from offended me. "See you later, Miss Sarah." "See you later, sir." Shoving my hands into the pockets of my Tom Ford slacks, I caught my reflection in a decorative mirror that hung on the wall. Me in a 3-piece suit. Who would have guessed? Not many years had passed since my brothers and I had left our hometown of Houston, Texas, to come to Austin and build our dream. I wore jeans and t-shirts back then. Since opening the resort, we'd all upped our fashion game. These days, our work uniforms consisted of expensive suits and ties. We wanted to make sure we made a statement that our resort was just as luxurious as our advertisements claimed. And that statement started with us. I'd never looked better. Unfortunately, it was wasted on the women at the resort. Before we'd even begun the hiring process, Baldwin, the eldest of us all, had sat me down to inform me that I wasn't to touch any of the women we hired to work at the resort. I would have been offended had I not been sure that he was right for having the sit-down chat with me. I'd left my first few jobs after having short relationships with coworkers. The last job in Houston was managing a small hotel where I'd secretly begun dating 3 of the employees. I knew we'd be leaving soon, and I'd thought, what the hell? And I went for it. So I'd had my last hurrah, and was ready to become a good owner with solid moral fiber, at least while I was at work. My free time was my own time, and I did whatever I damn well pleased. I did keep it discreet, though. Baldwin had also warned me not to bring any scandal to our resort. He was right to tell me that too. For some reason, scandals had never bothered me. I didn't care what other people thought, never had. But I wasn't in this alone anymore. The resort wasn't just mine. It belonged to all 5 of us, so I had to learn to care what people. "This is so exciting, Mama," I heard a little girl say, her high voice filled with enthusiasm as she stepped off the elevator. "Our room's so beautiful. I can't believe this is real life. Can you?" The woman who came out of the elevator behind the kid stole my complete attention. "I can believe this is real life, honey. And I'm glad I picked you to share this amazing trip with." She flipped her head to one side, her long blonde ponytail resting across one shoulder. I know her. Striding through the lobby with a few people meandering around in it, I couldn't take my eyes off the woman. She was only about 5'6" or so in height, and her build was pretty average. She had normal curves for a woman in her mid-20s, which is what I gauged her to be. Wearing a comfortable pink jogging ensemble and white running shoes, I figured she was about to go for a run on our state-of-the-art jogging trail that went all the way around the resort's grounds. When I pulled my eyes off her to look at the kid whose hand she took, I saw she was dressed in the exact same outfit as her mother. She was her spitting image, only the kid had long dark hair in a ponytail that hung down to the middle of her back. They made their way to the double glass doors at the lobby's entrance as I kept moving toward them. The woman looked over her shoulder before walking out, and our eyes met. After a fleeting spark lit up her golden eyes, she dropped her head and hurried to get out the door. But my memory had finally caught up with me. "Amber," I called out. "Amber Wilson, is that you?" She froze in place, her eyes on the floor. But the golden eyes of the lit TLE girl whose hand she held turned to find mine. "Who are you, mister?" "I'm Cohen Nash." Reaching out, I placed my hand on Ember's shoulder to see if I could get her to look at me. "Did I startle you, Ember?" Finally, she lifted her head and shook it. "No. I just wasn't sure I knew you, is all." She looked me up and down. "The suit threw me, Cohen." Running my hand over the lapel of the suit jacket, I chuckled. "Oh yeah. I forgot what I had on for a moment." Standing in the doorway, we were in the way of some others who were trying to get outside. "Come with me for a minute so we can catch up." Nodding, she held firmly to the little girl's hand. "Sure." Walking beside her, I led the way to the breakfast room so we could sit down. "What has you in Austin at my resort, Ember?" She stopped, her eyes huge. "Your resort?" "Well, my brothers and I own it." "So what has you here?" I took her elbow, gently urging her to keep moving. She came along slowly. "I was given this trip to the resort by the company I work for. It's in the oil field industry. I work away from home a lot and wanted to bring my daughter." "But you own this place, huh?" "Yeah." I could feel the tension in her body, even though I had only touched her elbow. I had no idea why she would be so tense with me. "You okay, Ember?" Jerking her head to look at me, she gasped, "Yes." "Why are you asking me that?" "I'm fine, Cohen." The tension mounted. So I tried to take it down a notch or two. "No reason." Leading them into the breakfast room, I gestured to the juice bar. I thought Ember could have used a stiff drink to help her relax a bit. But with the kid around, I thought that might be in bad taste. "You guys want some juice?" "I like the mango pineapple the best." "I bet I would like that too," the little girl said, as she pulled her hand out of her mother's and went to the machine with the yellowish juice flowing inside of it. "Mom, do you want a cup too?" "No." Ember sat down at one of the small tables. I took the seat across from her. So how are things back home? Your sister doing okay? I dated her older sister for a few months. Like all of my relationships, it hadn't worked out. Ash is married now. She's been married for the last 4 years. She's got 2 kids, and she's really happy. Ember looked at her kid, who came our way with a cup full to the brim with juice. You be careful not to spill that. I will. The little girl sat down with us. You know my Aunt Ash too. They used to date, Ember told her. Oh. She sipped the juice. Hey, this is good. Thanks for telling me about it. After another sip, she asked, why'd you break up? If I was her, I wouldn't have broken up with you. You're unwell, very unwell. I guess the word is hot. She blushed. I mean handsome. Thank you. You're a very pretty little girl yourself. I bet you have to beat the boys off with a stick, I said with a chuckle. You're funny, she said, then took another sip. Drink your juice, honey. We've got to get to our run, you know. Ember ran her hand through her daughter's ponytail, and I saw her hand shaking as she did it. I couldn't figure out why Ember hadn't told her kid how we used to date too. The fact was that Ember was the only girl who'd ever dumped me. She couldn't get over the fact that I'd dated her sister first. It wasn't like I went from one sister to the other. Half a year had passed between the time I dated Ash and the time Ember and I ran into each other at a local mall and ended up in bed together later that night. It didn't end there either. I liked Ember. She and I laughed at the same things. We liked the same kind of music, hard rock, and we liked the same food too. I'd taken her out to eat at her favorite restaurant, Red Lobster, on our first date. It was the annual Lobster Fest, and she'd pigged out. I loved the fact that she ate as much as she wanted, without worrying about what I might think. Ember could be herself with me, and I could be myself with her. Unfortunately, she broke things off after only a week of seeing each other. And we'd seen each other every single one of those 7 days. Even though it had only lasted a week, it hurt and was confusing when she said we couldn't see each other anymore. She kept saying how her family would be so mad at her for seeing someone her sister had dated, and that her sister would hate her. She couldn't lose or alienate her whole family over a guy like me, a womanizer. I had to admit that when she'd called me that, it had stung like crazy. Not that I could protest, since I was exactly what she dubbed me, even though I hated the term. I suppose I still am one, though. How long will you be staying, Ember? Even though she didn't seem to be nearly as comfortable with me as she'd once been, I had the feeling that if she and I could spend some time together, we'd hit it off again. And the idea made things stir inside of me that I hadn't felt since I'd seen her last, some 7 years ago. 2 nights is all. Tonight and tomorrow. It's a quick trip. I've got to get back to work on Monday. What sort of work is it that you do? Mommy works inside a little travel trailer with lots of gadgets that help her find out about the mud the oil rig is pulling up out of the hole. And she can tell if there's any gas in the mud too. She's a mud logger. And they say if you see the mud logger running out of their trailer and away from the rig, then you should run too, because it's about to blow up. Wow. I couldn't believe little Ember Wilson would have a job like that. That sounds very dangerous. It's not, Ember said with a tight jaw. I use the mud samples to make sure that doesn't happen. I've never had one blow out on me yet. She tapped her knuckles on the wooden table. Knock on wood. Still, it sounded as if she didn't get to spend much time at home with her kid. So you stay in the trailer on the rig site, or whatever they call it. Yes. She nodded. We work 12-hour shifts, my partner and me. I take the nights, and Roger takes the days. There are bunks in the back of the trailer for us to sleep in, and there's a little bathroom and kitchen too. She's been gone as long as a month sometimes, the little girl said. I miss her a lot. But I stay with my Grammy and Gramps, so it's not too bad. Ember had yet to formally introduce me to her daughter, so I took it upon myself to find out her name. Your mom hasn't told me your name yet, kiddo. Oh, it's Madison Michelle Wilson, Mr. Nash. Wilson. It seems Ember didn't marry the girl's father. Call me Cohen. Your mom and I are old friends, and I hope to get to spend some time with you both while you're here. Well, we've got to get to that run now. Ember stood, reaching out for Madison's hand. Come on, honey. See you guys later then. I hope so, Madison called out over her shoulder as her mother nearly sprinted out of the breakfast room. I hope so too, but the way Ember's acting doesn't bode well for that to happen.
Chapter 2. Ember.
How could I not know about Cohen Nash owning this freaking resort? 7 years of making sure to never cross paths with the man, and here I am staying in a resort that he owns. What were the chances of that happening? Houston was a big city, but not so big that people didn't talk about each other, especially those who'd made a huge success out of themselves. And Cohen had made an enormous success out of himself. I'd only ever seen the man wearing jeans and t-shirts. The expensive suit blew my mind. And he'd never looked better either. I hated how easily he affected me, making my insides melt just by seeing his handsome face. And when he touched me, moisture blossomed in my lower region, the way I'd only experienced with him. Unfortunately, the way he made me feel was on the taboo side since he'd dated my sister before dating me. And the secret week would have to stay that way, permanently. No one could ever know that Cohen and I had even shared so much as a single kiss on the cheek. My sister would die, and my parents would kill me if they ever found out the truth. His wavy dark hair had been longer back then. Now he wore it in a neat, shortly cropped style that made him look much more mature than he'd looked back then. But his eyes were still the same gorgeous green as always. He'd always been muscular, but I could tell he'd devoted much more time to keep his muscular physique in peak condition. Still the most attractive guy I've ever known. Madison had already showered and changed her clothes after our run. As I emerged from the bathroom in a white robe provided by the resort, I found her sitting on the bed with my cell phone in her hand. Yeah, Grandma, this place is crazy nice. And the man who owns this place knows Mom, and he knows Aunt Ash too. Isn't that crazy? Rolling my eyes, I went to the closet to pick something out to wear for lunch. Tell Mom I said hi. Mom says hi, Madison smiled at me. Wear something nice like me, Mom. I want to go somewhere fancy for lunch. She moved her hand over her blue dress, which made her dark hair stand out. Fancy, got it. I pulled out some casual gray slacks and a pink blouse. I'll wear my pink flats with this. How about your black heels? She counseled me with her wise fashion sense. Didn't bring them. I was on vacation with my 6-year-old kid. I hadn't planned a night out to town. The flats will work. Anyway, Grammy, why did Aunt Ash break up with Cohen? He's so handsome, and now he's got like $1 zillion or something, at least that's what Mom said. Aunt Ash really messed up. Your Aunt Ash is very happy with your Uncle Mike, so she didn't mess up, I let her know. Plus, Ash hadn't been the one to do the breaking up. Cohen had been the one who ended their relationship. And as far as I knew, he'd done all the breaking up with all the girls he'd dated. He'd broken many hearts along the way. From what he'd told me, I was the only woman ever to break up with him. Not that my heart hadn't been broken when I put an end to things. I'd liked Cohen. We had similar interests, and I really enjoyed his company. And he had bedroom moves that blew my mind. Leaving him wasn't easy. As a matter of fact, it was one of the hardest things I'd ever had to do. But it had to be done. Are you sure about that, Grammy? Madison asked as she looked at me with raised brows. Mom, Grammy says that he broke up with Aunt Ash. I don't know why you care, or why you thought that she broke up with him in the first place. No one told you that. You just came up with it on your own. I took my clothes, then went back into the bathroom to put them on. He doesn't look like a mean person, so I thought that it had to be Aunt Ash who broke up with him. You know what she's like. I did know how my older sister could be. But I didn't like my kid talking about her aunt in a negative way. She's good to you, and you know it. Yeah, me and only me, for some reason. Not Uncle Mike, and she can be pretty mean to Abby and Joey even though they're her own kids. You remember when she made them eat all the disgusting green peas on their plates? You didn't make me eat all of mine. That's because you're nicer than her. There was a pause and then I heard her talking to my mother. Grandma, I'm sorry. I know Aunt Ash loves me very much. But she's very bossy most of the time. And she has to have her way all the time. Looking in the mirror, I saw a line etched on my forehead. I'm only 27 for the love of all that's holy. Rubbing my fingers over it, I tried in vain to smooth it out. The fact was that I had a lot on my plate right now, and for the last 7 years. I needed this vacation to help take the load off my back for a couple of days. But now that Cohen was here, I knew that wasn't going to happen. The man had a strong will, and once he set his sights on something or someone, he didn't let up until he got what he wanted. And I could see it in his captivating green eyes. He wants me. So I would have to find ways to avoid him for the rest of our stay. And that was precisely why I planned on taking Madison out of the resort for all our meals. The resort provided all the meals for free, so the plan had been to eat at the restaurants there to save money. But with Cohen around, I wasn't about to take any chances. The man was and always would be a womanizer. And I had no room in my life for a man like that. Actually, I had no room in my life for any man at all. Since work already took so much of my time, my free time was reserved exclusively for my daughter. I'd taken the job 3 years ago, and it had changed our lives significantly. We'd gone from living with my parents to being able to get our own place. Sure, I was just renting, but at least we had our own home. And I could buy my daughter the things she needed, without relying on my parents for help. Making good money was nice, even though it interfered with being with my daughter. But my sights weren't set on remaining a mudlogger forever. My goal was to work in my company's office one day, whenever a job opening came around. Then things would be different, and I would have plenty of time to spend with my daughter. Grammy. Don't say things like that. It's rude, Madison chastised her grandmother. I'd finished getting dressed and came out to see what was going on. Madison, don't talk to your grandmother that way. Her jaw hung open, and her eyes were as big as saucers. But Mom, she said that Cohen Nash was a no-good no-account womanizer who used her daughter, then left her crying for weeks on end. And he seems too nice to have done those things. Tell your Grammy goodbye so we can get going. We've got to go find somewhere to eat. I held out my hand, wiggling my fingers for her to give me my cell phone. I love you, Grammy. Even if you are wrong about Cohen. Bye. She swiped the screen, ending the call before giving me the phone. She's not entirely wrong about him, honey. But your aunt didn't cry for weeks, it was more like a few days. Her pride was injured more than anything else. The fact was that my daughter was right about her aunt. Ash was bossy, and she did have to always have things her way. She'd always been like that. We'd gotten used to the way she acted, but Cohen never had. And that's why he ended things with her. He told me that much. What was Grammy talking about when she called him a womanizer? She got off the bed, then went to look at herself in the mirror. A womanizer. I still preferred to call him a gigolo. Well, he was one back then. But he was young, only 22. It means he used to date a lot of different girls. Maybe he still did. The absence of a wedding band on his finger told me that he hadn't settled down with anyone. Plus, he didn't mentee on having any kids of his own, and I felt sure he would have done that had he had some. But what did I know? I hadn't even heard that he'd become a zillionaire. If he was young when he did those things, then I don't think it counts. Do you, Mom? She smoothed her hair with one hand as her natural waves could be rather stubborn. You can't judge a person based on their past. Smiling, I took out the hairbrush. Come here and let me give your hair the once-over, then we'll go find somewhere fancy to eat just the way you want. While you were in the shower, I looked at the little book that was on the table. This place has 3 really fancy restaurants right here in the resort. I want to eat at this one. She ran over and picked up the brochure, then pointed at something. I can't sound out the word Essence. I didn't want to eat inside the resort and risk running into Cohen again. I thought we'd go out to find somewhere to eat. But look at these pictures, it looks so yummy. She stuck out her bottom lip in disappointment. It was a look that I could never say no to. Okay, honey. We can eat at the place you want. I would just have to make sure not to run into Cohen again. Easier said than done.
Chapter 3. Cohen.
Tomorrow, I want to take you out to eat. Her jaw dropped. In public? Looks like you don't want to be seen with me. I had to admit that her words stung quite a bit. We could go to the other side of the city, or out to Galveston even. Cohen, I like you, I really do. I've never had such a natural connection with anyone before. But this can't really happen. You know that, right? I knew she was worried about something that wasn't worth worrying about. Look, you know that your sister and I didn't get along. Honestly, I could never figure out why she acted so hurt when I told her we needed to end things. We'd had this dumb fight over me ordering another beer, after she told me not to. I'm a man, not some kid who needs a woman to tell me what I can and can't do. I know how she can be. Her hands moved over my pecs as she looked at them while biting her lower lip. How do you have so many amazing muscles? I work out. I took her hands, pulling her down to me as I ran her arms around my neck. Kiss me, and let's not think about anything but you and me. Agreed. And that's how things went with us. We agreed on pretty much everything. Well, there was that one exception. We'd never agreed that it was the right thing for us to stop seeing each other, after only 1 week of the best times I'd ever had. And I was sure it had been the best week of her life, too. But she ended it anyway. Opening my eyes, I thought I might remind her of the night we snuck off to the other side of Houston to go to Red Lobster. Since it was nearly 6 in the evening, I called the head chef of Essence. He answered on the first ring. What can I do for you this evening, boss? I would like for you to make a lobster dinner for 2, complete with the best bottle of white wine you have right now. Are you going to come into the restaurant to dine, or should I have it sent to your office? It's not for me. It's for one of our guests and her little girl. You'll need to send it to Ember Wilson's room. And make sure you send a fruity drink for her little girl, too. I hoped that would inspire Ember to spend some time with me. I'll have it to her room within half an hour. Great. Thanks. I'd called her room a little afternoon to ask her to join me for lunch, but she'd said that she and her daughter had already eaten. And from the security camera in the hallway near her room, I could see that she hadn't left her suite since then. I had seen our staff coming and going, though, telling me that she and her daughter were spending the day getting pampered with massages, facials, and manicures. I was starting to think that Ember didn't want to be out and about in the resort for fear she'd run into me. If that were the case, it meant she was afraid of not being able to control herself where I was concerned. Which was great, because I also had a hard time controlling myself where she was concerned. That's just the way it was between us. There was her kid to consider, though, and I hadn't ever had to consider a kid before. But I liked kids, and her having one was in no way a deal-breaker. All I wanted to do was spend time with them. I liked Ember's company, after all. Did I want to be with her? For sure. But I knew that was going to be a long shot with her little girl around. In the future, though, well, that was a different story altogether. There would only be a little over 2 hours separating us when she went back to Houston. I could easily handle the drive to go see her as often as she'd let me. Something on the computer screen caught my attention, and I saw that the meals were being delivered to Ember's room. She answered the door wearing a white robe, looking relaxed and refreshed. There wasn't any sound, so I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could tell it wasn't what I had imagined. She shook her head and looked aggravated as one line formed on her forehead. She pointed the porter back down the hallway, and he left quickly, taking the cart with the tray of food with him. What in the hell? Moments later, Essence was calling me. This is Cohen. This is Sammy, the room service manager. I'm afraid the lobster meal you sent to Miss Wilson has been returned due to her daughter having an allergy to shellfish. What would you like for us to do, sir? Make up a couple of plates of mac and cheese. But don't send them up. I'll come to get them. Huffing as I ended the call, I berated myself for not thinking about allergies when I'd ordered the food. Locking my office for the night, I made my way to Essence to pick up the plates they had ready for me by the time I got there. Heading to Ember's suite, I sort of hated yet loved how butterflies swarmed in my stomach. This is so not like me. But that was what Ember did to me. Things inside of me that no one else seemed to be able to. Mentally preparing myself for her reaction, I knocked on the door. Room service. The door opened quickly. Already, agitation showed on her very pretty face. I didn't order. Oh, it's you. It is me. I brought something for you and little Madison. She hadn't taken a step back, so I wasn't sure what her intentions were. May I come in? Madison poked her head out from behind her mother, a smile on her rosebud lips. Hi. You've brought us something too. How nice. She moved in between her mother and me. Can you come in for a little bit? I can. I watched Ember's puffed chest deflate as she turned and walked away. Although she looked less than thrilled to be stuck with my company, Madison seemed very happy that I'd stopped by. She led the way to the small dining table. Over here, Mr. Cohen. Someone brought us something earlier that I can't eat. Mom sent it back. What did you bring? I placed the silver dome trays on the table, then pulled the lids off. I brought our famous mac and cheese. Clapping, she laughed as she pulled the white robe she wore around her a bit tighter, then took a seat. Yes. I love mac and cheese. It's my all-time favorite. How'd you know? Because it's my favorite too. Looking over my shoulder, I found Ember heading into the bathroom with some clothes in her hands. I brought a plate for you too, Ember. I'm going to get dressed. I don't feel comfortable in the robe. She closed the door behind her, leaving me and Madison alone. Madison didn't seem to have that same problem, as she was quick to grab a fork and begin digging into the cheesy meal. I'm not going to wait for her. She always takes a long time in the bathroom. Taking the chair across from her, I sat down. Did you have fun today? Fun? She shook her head. But I liked it. I got a massage, but it kind of hurt at first. And then someone painted my nails. She held out one hand, wiggling her pink-tipped fingers. See? My toes match. Mom got a color she called nude. I call it boring. I wanted her to get red nails, but she said no way to that idea. I think Mom doesn't like to stand out for some reason. Which doesn't make sense because she's really pretty, especially for someone so old. I tried to hold back a smile. I guess everyone seemed old when you were 6. Maybe she doesn't want to stand out because of her job. She's got to be mostly working with men on the oil rigs. I bet that's why she's not into wearing things like red nail polish, even though she would look beautiful with that color on her nails. She would look beautiful. You are so right, Mr. Cohen. You can skip the Mr. part and just call me Cohen. No one except the staff calls me Mr. And you're a friend, right? Sure I am. She stopped, her fork hanging in the air as she looked right into my eyes. Since we're friends, can you tell me why my Grammy doesn't like you? Well, I broke up with her oldest daughter. And she must have never understood why. I hadn't meant to get into this type of conversation with the kid, but I couldn't ignore the question. Did you break up with Aunt Ash because she's bossy and always wants to have her way? She nodded knowingly, as if she already knew the answer to her question. I didn't want to say anything bad about her aunt. We just didn't connect well, that's why I ended things with her. But she's married with kids now, so she must have found a nice man who she connects with, and I'm happy for her. I knew you were nice. She shoved her fork into the mound of macaroni. I did too, came Ember's soft voice.
Chapter 4. Ember.
It was too surreal. He was here, with us. I'd never seen this coming. Now that it was actually happening, I wasn't sure what I was going to do anymore. Cohen pulled a couple of wine bottles from the bag he'd brought in with him. I'm not sure which goes with mac and cheese, red or white, so I brought both. The food didn't tempt me, not even a little. I'll take some red. I'm not hungry right now, so it won't really matter what color I drink. The suite had a minibar, so I went to grab a couple of glasses and pulled out a bottle of apple juice from the mini fridge for Madison. Madison said she liked what you guys did today, but she didn't have fun, he said as I brought the glasses. So, I thought I might take you guys to a cave tour tomorrow so she can have some fun while you're here. Madison started jumping up and down in excitement. Mom, say yes please. Her eyes were as bright as I'd ever seen them. A cave, Mom? A real cave. We've gotta go. I'll think about it. I couldn't make any hasty decisions right now. There was too much at stake. That means no. She sulked, her lower lip pushed out to make sure everyone clearly understood that she wasn't happy with my decision. It doesn't mean no, I corrected her as I so often had to when I said those words she hated to hear. It just means that I need to think about it. It's just a little trip to a cave, and then maybe we could grab lunch somewhere like, Cohen drummed his fingers on the table, Cheesy Town Pizza and Arcade Parlor? Holy smokes. Mom? She jumped out of her chair and hugged me as if that might make me say yes. Please. I looked at Cohen, who smiled passionately at me. Yeah, please? I said I'll think about it. Okay, you two? I picked up the bottle of red wine he'd opened. You want a glass too? You bet. He turned his attention to Madison. That sure looks yummy. She grabbed the other fork and handed it to him. There's way too much for just me. We can share. His grin gave his hunger away, and he was quick to take the fork, plunging it into the heaping mound of mac and cheese. I wasn't kidding when I said this is my favorite too. My mouth's been watering ever since I picked it up. As I finished filling 2 glasses with the wine, I looked up to find them both tilting their heads to the right. They were holding their forks the same way too, and then they even chewed slowly and closed their eyes with eyed-in-tickle expressions, as if the macaroni was the best thing they'd ever tasted. How can she be so much like him when she's never even met him before? This is the best mac and cheese I've ever tasted, Cohen. She looked at me. I wish you could make it this way. Me too. But the box I use probably doesn't come close to comparing to that recipe. Maybe your new friend could ask the chef for the recipe for me. I took a sip of the wine and found it unbelievably delicious. Wow. This must have cost a fortune. A small one. Cohen gave me a nod. And I can get you any recipe you like. She's never home enough to make it for me. Madison picked up the bottle of juice and tried to open it but couldn't. I was just about to reach out for it when she handed it to Cohen. Can you open this for me, please? Sure, sweetie. He opened the bottle then gave it back to her, before looking at me. You're really away from home that much, Ember? I work a lot, yeah. It wasn't like I had any control over my schedule. When my partner and I are given a job, we have to stay on it until the oil well is finished. The company men don't like any changes of any kind in the crew on their rigs. It's just how they do things. Most of the jobs only last a couple of weeks. But every now and then there's one that lasts a month, sometimes even longer. But my boss tries his best not to put me on those. Roger's in his 60s and I'm a mother, so he tries to put us on jobs that aren't expected to last much longer than 2 weeks. Madison shrugged. All I know is that sometimes Mama gets home for only a couple of days, and then she has to leave again. I don't like that. I think she should have as much time at home as she does at work. Well, this job doesn't work that way, honey. And it's a good-paying job, so I can't really complain when they send me back to work. I took another sip of the wine, hoping it would make me care less that she was airing our troubling family situation to a man who should feel like a stranger to her. A look of concern filled Cohen's face. Is this your career now, Ember? It's a stepping stone. The company is rather small. I'm waiting for a position in the office to open up, and then I'll see if I can get a desk job where I can be home every day. Of course, Madison had left that part out while she was telling him all about how much I wasn't at home with her. Well, that's good. Isn't it, Madison? Another shrug. I don't know when that's going to happen. It's been forever already. 3 years, I said, feeling more than a little ashamed of how my kid was making her life sound. And she stays with my parents while I'm away. She's got her own bedroom full of toys over there. This kid has it good. Don't let her make you think otherwise. I don't think she has it bad at all, he said with a smile that told me he was being honest. I think she just misses her mama. Well, I'm here right now, kiddo. So, what do you want to do with the rest of our night? We could go see that movie you've been asking about. The one where the kids go to outer space. I already saw it with Gramps. She looked at Cohen. What are you gonna do tonight? He looked at me. I'm free. I wasn't about to let him take us out, both that night and the next day too. Well, as my daughter has so eloquently pointed out, we don't get much time together, so I'd like to do something just me and her. You understand, don't you? Nodding, he looked a bit disappointed. Yeah, you're right. You two spend the night together. I can hang out with you guys tomorrow. Can he, Mom? Her eyes stared daggers into mine, daring me to tell her no. I had no idea why she liked him so much. She hadn't had enough time to get to know him at all. I supposed it was due to his charm and good looks. The man must have emitted pheromones that pulled women of all ages to him, like a tractor beam. What Madison didn't know about the man was how easily he could move from one woman to the next without looking back. Sure, he'd spend some time with us, but once we left, we'd be out of his mind and he'd move on to the next in line. I know that all too well. I had been the one to end things between us. But he'd moved on in a couple of months, and never tried to get back in touch. That had hurt worse than the night we'd actually broken up. He had no idea that I'd seen him holding hands with some other woman as they walked into a nightclub only 2 months after our breakup. He was out on the town, and I was going out of my mind. He'd moved on, and my life had all but stopped. He had a bright future, and mine had never looked so uncertain. With Cohen Nash unaware of how shattered I had felt after our breakup, he was capable of getting on with his life and new romantic pursuits. But romance for me had been put on hold, for what seemed would be a hell of a long time. Ember, you okay? He asked, touching my hand which was lying on the table next to my glass of wine. Just like it always had, lightning ripped right through me with his touch. I looked into his green eyes, finding that the thin trails of brown still ran through them, and around the outer edges of his irises. I'm fine. I was more than fine, as feeling his touch again made my heart soar. My soul begged for more. So, how about tomorrow? He moved the tips of his fingers lightly over the back of my hand. My treat. The whole day, and even the night if you two want. I'd love to show you around and help Madison find some fun. Finding fun was sort of his thing. Part of his charm was how inventive he could be when showing a girl a good time. Not that I had ever needed an why thing more than just being with him. It didn't matter where we were, or what we were doing for that 1 week we were together. It was always fun, interesting, and sometimes even mind-blowing. But one day with him would only end up hurting me more than I'd already been hurt by the man, even though he was completely unaware that he'd hurt me at all. And by the way my daughter was acting, one day would only make her ask me why there couldn't be more. But there couldn't be more, and I knew that. Even if Cohen didn't understand or agree, my family meant the world to me, and I couldn't hurt them just so I could have what and who I really wanted. The past was the past, but the people in my life would never understand the things I'd done back then. I didn't want any hard feelings with the people I not only cared about, but relied on to help me with my daughter. I hadn't done it alone, after all. When I came to my family, telling them of the pregnancy, they'd rallied around me and made things as good as they could be back then. Even when I lied to them and told them I didn't want anything to do with the father, as it had been a mistake and a one-night stand. They'd helped me through the pregnancy and becoming a new mother at the tender age of 21. My sister had held my hand while I delivered my daughter. She'd been there for me in all ways. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that she would feel completely betrayed if she learned the truth. Cohen had no idea that I'd followed him to the nightclub the night I took the pregnancy test. Finding out that we'd made a baby in the brief time we'd spent together had been very difficult. It had been hard enough having to end it after coming as close to being in love as I'd ever gotten, so I already was an emotional wreck that night. But when he got out of his truck and went around to help his date, talking her by the hand and leading her inside for a night of drinking and donking, I couldn't tell him what I'd tracked him down for. I couldn't tell him that he was going to be a father. And I never will tell him the secret I've kept from everyone for 7 long years. I'm sorry, Cohen. I need to spend time with my daughter, alone.
Chapter 5. Cohen.
I wasn't used to feeling lonely. It wasn't something I'd often felt in my life. Tonight was a rare occasion for me. Home alone, a glass of Jameson on the rocks in one hand, the television remote in the other, I was just about to plop down on the sofa to binge-watch something that would take my mind off Ember. My cell rang, and I perked up, hoping it was Ember calling to tell me she'd changed her mind about tomorrow. I'd left my business card with my personal phone number on it on the table in her room, to make sure she could call me if she wanted to. When I pulled the phone out of my pocket, disappointment squashed the hope that had so quickly welled up inside of me. "Tanya," I mumbled and sent the call to voicemail. I'd seen her a couple of times in the last week. There weren't any sparks there, though. If Ember hadn't come back into my life, then I would have taken the call and would have probably ended up in the sack with the woman. With the fresh reminder of what genuinely emotional connection with someone felt like, that someone being Ember, I couldn't muster the energy to even talk to anyone else. Tonight, being alone was better than pretending to enjoy Tanya's company. Taking a seat, I took a sip of the drink. Although the liquid was chilled with ice, the whiskey burned as it moved down my throat. A slow burn began in my stomach, not only because of the alcohol, Ember played a part in it too. I couldn't mindlessly watch television with her on my mind, so I put down the remote and got up to take a walk outside. I'd lived the last year in the house I had built. My sister-in-law, Sloane, had designed it to my specifications and drawn the blueprints. I loved my home. But tonight it felt as empty as a tomb. With the idea that I'd be a bachelor for life, I hadn't built enormous mansions the way my older brothers had. Instead, I had a modest amount of square footage. The 4,000 square foot housed 3-bedroom suites. Each suite had seating areas, its own bathrooms, and enormous walk-in closets with private laundry facilities. I thought my guests would like such luxuries. On the occasions when our cousins from Carthage, the gentry brothers, came to Austin to visit, they'd stay at my place most of the time. Since I had no wife and kids to worry about, my place was perfect for guests. Along with the spare bedroom suites, there was my master bedroom. My den of iniquity. I'd had my bed custom made. Larger than a California king, I called it a Texan emperor. The home had a large living room at the front entrance. A chef-inspired kitchen, designed by my younger brother Stone, looked beautiful but didn't get much use. I'd wanted Stone to have a nice place to cook from time to time. He loved coming over to cook up a meal, so I could impress a date. He was a real wingman, my baby brother. Meandering out of the media room, I went to the sunroom, then out the back door and onto the patio. The underwater lights of the swimming pool that filled up the large backyard made the clear water glisten. The sound of the waterfall feature echoed off the pale gray rock walls of the guesthouse. 3 guest suites were probably enough to accommodate my visitors, but a 2,000 square foot guesthouse out by the pool just seemed like a good idea. Plus, it had a games room that could be accessed right off the patio. A pool table, some old arcade games, and a foosball table were just some of the fun things to do there. A state-of-the-art sound system made that room home as well. It fed the many outdoor speakers that were all over the backyard. Going across the patio, I went into the guest house. The lights came on as I entered. The maid service had come that morning, and everything smelled fresh. As I looked around the living room, my eyes stopped on the fireplace. Turning around, I went to the control panel on the wall next to the door and hit the button for the fireplace. In an instant, the lights above dimmed, and the orange and yellow flames danced within the glassed-in structure. Not only could you enjoy the scene from the living room, but you could also enjoy it from the dining room. I walked around the house, wondering why I was even there. My melancholy mood had me acting oddly. Sitting at the table for four, I placed my glass on the shiny wooden surface as I watched the fire ebb and flow in a slow rhythm. Mesmerizing. The gold in the flames reminded me of Ember's eyes, light brown with golden flecks that danced at times. As she came to mind again, I thought about what her little girl had said about how much she had to work away from home. There were things I could do for them to make their lives better. But Ember hadn't ever been one to take a handout. I've got to figure out how to give her something without her seeing it as a charity. A job wouldn't be seen as a handout. And if that job had perks, such as a home that went with it, then that wouldn't seem like a handout either. Having Ember living in my guest house would mean lots of changes for me. Since she hadn't said a thing about our relationship in front of Madison, I figured she still wouldn't want to have a public relationship with me. And I was no longer the type of man who would remain hidden. Asking her to work for the resort and move into my guest house could make things extremely difficult for me. With her living only across the patio, I wouldn't feel comfortable bringing women home. Not that that would be the worst of it. If Ember was that close to me, then I would definitely want her in all ways. If she didn't want me, or wanted me but not a real relationship, things would turn bad between us very quickly. I have no idea what I should do. Uprooting her and Madison just to please myself was too selfish. On the other hand, making it so they could spend more time together would be a genuinely nice thing to do. Although, she might find it a bit too generous of me and ask me what I would want from her in return. And what would my answer be? It would be a lie if I said that I wanted nothing from her. I already wanted lots from her. Lots of hugs and kisses. She will never go for that. At least not the way I'd want. Ember had ended what we had because she didn't want to ruin her relationship with her older sister. She didn't want her parents getting upset and disappointed in her either. From what I understood in the brief time we'd spent together at the resort, she still felt the same damn way. Drumming my fingers against the table, I racked my brain for ideas of what I should and should not do. I wasn't sure that Ember would even take any offer I made her. And Madison had to be extremely close to her grandparents, since they'd been taking care of her for years. She probably wouldn't want to leave them either. Taking another sip of the Jameson, I wished that I had the perfect idea. Or at least, the self-discipline not to act on my attraction towards Ember if that was what would be best for her and her kid. She wasn't alone in the world, after all. She had her daughter and her entire family to consider. I had no one to consider, and that made things easy for me. I could do whatever I wanted with whoever I wanted. Yeah, but she could too if she'd only stop thinking her whole family would disown her for being with me. Of course, taking a job from me and moving into my guest house wasn't going to be a thing any of her family would be okay with anyway. So why am I torturing myself with all these guessing games? A smile formed on my lips as I nodded. I cared for Ember, always had. I hadn't even thought once about ending things with her back then. The truth was that she was the only woman I'd ever started falling in love with. And she had yanked it all away from me so quickly that it broke something inside my heart. The night she broke up with me was the second worst time in my life. Losing my parents took first place. But losing Ember left a deep scar as well. I couldn't help but want to see if we still had a chance at finding love, real, true love. I hadn't found it in 7 years, and neither had she. That had to be a sign that we weren't meant to be with other people. We were meant to be with each other, and that was it. How in the hell am I going to be able to get her alone long enough to talk about us? I took another drink, closing my eyes to try and rid my mind of all the questions. This was useless. Ember wouldn't give me another chance. She wouldn't give us another chance. I had to come to terms with the facts and let go of the what-ifs. Putting the empty glass down, I opened my eyes and saw the fire again. It didn't comfort me at all, as the golden hues only reminded me of her eyes and blonde hair. I left the guest house and went to my own. Refilling my drink, I returned to the media room to watch television. I had to stop trying to come up with some idea that Ember would surely shoot down. As I sat down, something came to me. What if I get her sister's AP Proval? Cocking my head to one side, I weighed the idea in my mind. If Ash doesn't care if we see each other, there would be no reason for Ember to balk at seeing me. Pulling out my cell from my pocket, I went to my social media app to look up Ash. You can't do this. I put the phone on the coffee table in front of me. If I asked Ash anything about Ember, she would tell her what I'd done. And then Ember would be furious at me. She didn't hate me, and I never wanted her to. I had no right answers for how to get Ember back in my arms and my bed. Why does love have to be so damn hard? End of sneak peek for Billionaire's Secret Baby, a second chance romance.
Please like and subscribe to support this channel. It helps more than you know.